And it was somebody who'd been ran over on an expressway. And this guy had his head run over, basically, by a van at 50 miles an hour. And so his brain and skull smashed, splattered 20 metres across the road. I took hold of his right arm, which is like the approved technique, just take him by the arm, guide him back to the cell. But I didn't see in his left hand, he had a mug of hot tea. And as soon as I got hold of his arm, it just went whoosh. So that prisoner then got transferred out to, I think it was HMP Liverpool. And at HMP Liverpool, he tried to murder an officer there.
Wow.
From towards the end of your pregnancy, up until the baby's 18 months old, the prisoner can live with the baby. But like I say, it's like 3 street style of houses. And this mother and baby unit was on the same sort of street as one of the houses, which housed mainly people who'd killed kids and babies. We saw all sorts. People had cut themselves, people had insert things into themselves. Like there was one woman who used to put pens inside her arm. She'd just stick a full pen in her arm into her veins. You know, you saw people they were like characters on a horror film, you know, just faces covered in slashes and scars and all of this.
I really relate to that. I remember going into Styal as a researcher. I'd be interviewing people and there'd just be like blood dripping out of their arms.
The manager said to me, "Oh, you know who it is, don't you? This constant watch, it's Lucy Letby." And it was her first night. Obviously, she's got whole life tariff now, but it was her first night on remand. She'd come from court that day, been charged. First thing sort of hit me, you see all these photographs, you know, it's this like normal looking sort of blonde woman. And I was surprised how sort of dishevelled she looked. She didn't have blonde hair, brown hair. She just looked sort of drained. But I always think back to that first night when she was there and I was sat watching her, thinking if I'd have been accused of this, I'd be climbing the walls. I'd be saying, "Let me out, I've not done this." But it was almost as if it was just a bit of a burden to her. She was just a bit like, "Oh, I'm here." He was the longest serving prisoner I ever came across. But there was something a bit strange about him. He seemed a bit, over friendly, to a new officer. And we say, "Oh, he's been at Risley for 20 years, but he's been in prison for 38 years or something." He basically, I don't know, he propositioned a woman and she rejected him. So he killed her. And then did things to her when she was dead. Dumped her on some coal heap somewhere. Went home, went to bed. Back to his family. Woke up the next day. Went back to where she was. Had his way with her again. He's actually out now, this man. He actually got released fully.
I'm hugely delighted to have Dave with us today. He is a former prison officer. He's got some hard-hitting stories, including getting jugged, meeting Lucy Letby, and he was predominantly at Styal and Risley up here in the Northwest. And I've got my friend and fellow collaborator who's going to be launching her own podcast soon, Dr. Lorna Brooks. She's got more credentials than anyone I know. And she's going to be co-hosting with me on this interview with Dave. Now, coming in, we were talking about, there's this news story whereby the Southport stabber has jugged a prison officer. And before we get to your story, Dave, in the order it all happened, there was a particularly dark day for you towards the end of your career in the service.
Yeah, there was, yeah. Very much reflecting what he's done. Basically, I went into work, I think it was a Saturday, and I was normally based on one particular wing. And on this particular day, because of staffing, I was placed somewhere else. So you're less familiar with the prisoners. The regime's sort of the same, but you don't know sort of who to keep an eye on, more than others when everybody's unlocked. And I was given one particular landing, so there's 3 landings on each wing at Risley. On the landing I was given, there was a prisoner on, they call it an act document, which means that prisoner particularly is at risk of harming themselves or, being a danger to themselves. So with them, you might have to check them every 2 hours, every hour, 5 times an hour. I can't remember if it was 2 or 3 times an hour. So first thing I did on the wing in the morning was check the prisoner, spoke to him. just said, "Morning, you all right?" And he was like, "Yeah, sound boss, yeah." And then the morning went on for a couple of hours as normal. We unlocked his particular landing for association. I think it was coming to sort of, it was past COVID, but it was coming to the end of sort of all the COVID restrictions in prison. So whereas a whole wing of 180 prisoners might be unlocked at once, it was just one landing of maybe 60 prisoners. And so he was on the second landing up, this particular prisoner. So he's unlocked, and then he came downstairs to the first landing.
Do you remember what he looked like?
I don't remember what he looked like, yeah, definitely. Quite unassuming. He wasn't like big, wasn't like, particularly small. He was just your grey man, just the average prisoner. That might sound strange, but... and I was told then to do the exercise yard, supervise the exercise yard. And this prisoner was stood at the door of a cell that wasn't on his landing. And I'm walking towards the yard. And he says to me, "Oh, boss, can I get a vape off this lad here?" Because vapes, obviously in prison, are like the currency, to trade for drugs, trade for anything, food, shower gel. And I said to him, "No, if you want to swap something with him, do it at dinner time when you're all out. You'll cross over with him. But I'm doing the exercise yard now." I didn't shout at him, didn't raise my voice or out. I didn't just say no. I explained why the answer's no. And then he turned around and shouted to two other officers who were on the second landing up, "Come down here quickly, sort him out before I knock him out." Just all of a sudden. Like, I didn't raise my voice. He'd been calm up to then. Like I say, he said good morning to me about an hour ago. And he walked off. And I had about 10 seconds just thinking, oh, that's unexpected. I thought, well, he's threatened to knock me out, so he's got to be locked up. So I followed him up the stairs. He walked past the two officers who he'd shouted to. And as I followed him, I said to them, "He's just threatened to knock me out. He needs to go behind his door." So they all came with me. And so obviously verbally I told him, right, you can't speak to me like that. You've got to go behind your door. He ignored me. I think one of the other officers said the same to him. Ignored him. So we thought, right, we'll have to grab him. He's threatening like that. He's on the Act document, so he's threatened violence to me, but he's also a risk to himself. And he's agitated, so who knows what'll happen. So I walked up to him, again, not surprising him, saying like, I spoke to him as I walked up to him, so he knows he's then behind him, so I'm not startling him. I took hold of his right arm, which is like the approved technique, just take him by the arm, guide him back to the cell. But I didn't see in his left hand, he had a mug of hot tea. And as soon as I got hold of his arm, it just went whoosh. On me ear, the back of my neck there. Like I say, some people have been done like kettles with sugar in and stuff like that, but I remember sort of yelping. I don't sort of exclaim, but because of the heat, it was like a fresh brew. And the other two officers obviously started struggling with him. And then I obviously helped him once we'd got him on the floor, but it took me a moment to orientate myself again because I had that going on. I didn't know if it was in my eyes or anything like that. And then, I don't know, somebody pressed the alarm, somebody went on the radio, asked for assistance, and the cavalry comes then.
What was the sting like from that? Or was your adrenaline firing up and you couldn't feel it at first?
Well, I felt the initial shock of burning because it made me sort of exclaim, but it was like a split second and then it kicks in. Just right, yeah, we've got to restrain him. Your training kicks in. And your priority then isn't get yourself first aid. I'm not sure I sound like a hero out because I'm not. The priority is, get him before he does that to someone else or before he does something worse. He's thrown that over me, which he didn't see. He could have anything on him. He could have a blade on him or anything. Other prisoners nearby might either try and sort of be on his side and start attacking us or might start attacking him because obviously it wasn't my wing, but when you're a regular officer on a wing, you build a relationship with prisoners, so I might think, oh, why is he fighting that officer I like, And yeah, he got taken off to the segregation unit at that point. I didn't take him. I went, sat downstairs, and that's when I realised my white shirt's brown, covered in tea. I've got a touched there. Like, when you've got a sunburn and you touch it, you can sort of feel it, like blistering. And this is, well, like the wider picture of a prison service. Manager came in who's called Oscar One, there, the orderly officer who's in charge of the prison for that morning. They walked into the room where I'm sat in the staff room, and they looked at me and they said, "Oh, how's the prisoner?" It's like, well, I'm sat there covered in tea. I didn't see myself. It must have been red. It was obvious what had happened. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, they came back to me and said, I told them I'm burnt here, you know. So they said, go see the nurse. So nobody saw the nurse that was coming. They didn't say on the radio there's an officer injured to healthcare. Somebody's coming to you. So I went and they said, they put some sort of gauze on it, sort of bandaged it up like we do. And they said, the governor came at that point, the duty governor who was on. And he said, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay? Do you want to go to hospital? Do you want to go home? And I said, well, I was only on a short shift anyway, I think a morning shift, so I thought I'll go home, but I'll come back in the next couple of days tomorrow. And he said to me, how are you getting home? I was all drive. And he said, oh no, I don't like that. I'll get somebody to take you. So that shows the sort of spectrum of the management. One's asking, how's the prisoner? And then one's asking, making sure I'm safe. But they're not on the same hymn sheet, which I'm sure we'll touch on later on.
Yeah, we will.
And the end of that story is, normally when an officer is assaulted, the prison reports it to the police. But the manager who was on, the lesser manager, who then said, how's the prisoner? Said, oh, you'll have to report it to the police. So in my own time. So when I got home then, I got to ring the police, 101, whatever it is. Went in, gave a statement. Actually, there's something I've just remembered, which is an addition to this story. I made the complaint to the police then. You know, I'm an officer here, I've been assaulted by this prisoner. So obviously that goes into the prison as intelligence. So that prisoner then got transferred out to, I think it was HMP Liverpool. And at HMP Liverpool, I think he tried to murder an officer there.
Wow.
Well, I think initially it was attempted murder. It went to Section 18 after. But he tried to throw him over the railings, the officer. I read it on his thing, you know, just looking to see, you know, where he's up to with the court case. Because obviously a court case is coming involving me. And then he went to court, he pleaded not guilty for my assault. So I think I went to court about 3 times because I went to court, he didn't turn up, then I went to court again, and then the judge was busy or something. And then the third time I went with the other 2 officers who were with me. We sat there all morning and we said, oh, he's still pleading not guilty. And then about 3-4 hours later, the usher, whoever it was, came in and said, oh, he's pled guilty now. Because I think they've told him, like, there's 3 officers here with witness statements who've seen you, with CCTV. And he got 8 months added on to his sentence. So it wasn't a perfect story how it was dealt with, but in the end, I think there was justice. I don't know how long he was in for anyway, but obviously that's another 8 months. So it's another 4 months actually inside. So in the end, I was satisfied, but it could have gone a lot smoother.
Yeah.
Right, let's go back to then what you were like as a young person so we can figure out what got you to this point where you entered this profession that's got such risks that you've just described.
Well, in school, I was young, I was born in Mornington and went to school there. I was very sort of shy and awkward, I think. I was always described in my school report as, you know, oh, he is a nice lad, but he's very quiet. You know, he doesn't speak unless I speak to him. He won't put his hand up. So obviously I wasn't ready for that confrontation about, you know, I wasn't putting myself out there as like the class clown or the loudmouth or anything like that. And that went all the way through, to be honest, because sort of through to high school, my early teens, I'm 6'4" now. I was probably stopped growing when I was about 13 and I had a beard when I was 14. So obviously I'm a target. I'm going to get bullied. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was a great, you know, character building for me. And probably people are going to probably saying, oh, he was bullied at school, so he's become a police officer, prison officer. But that's, I don't know what form of decision, because a lot of people grow up and want to be, from a young age, I want to be a police officer, want to be a prison officer, want to do this. The varied in what I wanted to do as a career. Like, I remember wanting to be a car mechanic, a firefighter, various other things, but it was never anything like in the military or never anything like dealing with criminals. And then, so went to primary school, high school, college, and then after doing public services at college where you learn about military services and military, I saw it came to the point where I'm leaving sixth form college and I've got to think, right, what am I going to do? Am I going to get a job? Am I going to get a trade? Am I going to go to university? And I wasn't extremely academic. You know, I couldn't have done a proper degree in anything like, you know, history, English, anything like that. And I saw a course, it was called Policing, Law and Investigation. It was a foundation degree. And part of this degree, they sort of missold it to us in hindsight. I found out years later. They said it guaranteed you a job if you passed this course as a police officer. And as part of the degree, you become a special constable, which is a volunteer police officer. So I thought, well, it's got a job at the end of it. I don't have to go, you know, it's not a traditional uni course, might be quite interesting. So having never thought about it all my life, I thought, I'll go for that. And, well, that's a story in itself. That university course, what I did as special constable, it's a 2-year degree course where you learn, it's basically, when you join as a full-time police officer, you do something like 6 months training. It was kind of that spread over 2 years, and you get a degree at the end of it. But you become a special constable. So the first 2 weeks weren't at a university. They were at the police training college. And you learn all the basic, like, you know, personal safety, self-defense stuff. You learn bits, basic law, how to behave, the standards of being in the police, you know, like, they call it the code of ethics, you know, how you got to behave. And then after going back in the classroom for 3 or 4 months, you did a 10-week placement at a particular police station. It was Widnes I went to. And it was 10 weeks, basically. You were attached to a response team in the police and you're part of the team. You know, you partnered up with a tutor officer and you responded to jobs. You're a police officer. You're going out to calls. You work in all the shifts they do, night shifts.
Do you remember your first call?
I do. It wasn't very spectacular, to be honest. I think it was somebody trying to do damage to themselves. And mental health sort of incident. Concern for safety, that's what they call it. But I remember I was only 19 years old, like being in the car, blue lights on, thinking, how have I ended up here? You know, it was just, I decided to do this course on a whim. Like,
did you enjoy that course?
Well, after that 10-week placement, you then didn't really have to do much as a special, like at a police station on a team. You could just do, I think it was 16 hours a week or a month minimum, alongside the, like, Monday to Friday at the university. But I kept going and going, and we're probably watching now, I skipped the university classes just to go on shift because I enjoyed it. So that was 2014 I started doing that, and then 2-year course finished in 2016, and then I stayed a special until 2018. So all the way through 2017 I had some like part-time evening jobs and stuff keep me going, and I still lived at home, but I did basically 40 hours a week, voluntary, no pay.
Wow.
Attached to this response team in the police.
So the police we've interviewed, they see some serious stuff. Did you start to see some serious stuff?
Oh yeah, well, one particular event happened, I think it was early on because I was still 19. I was partnered with a police officer who was trained in body recovery, we call it. So that's when somebody's body's not intact.
Wow.
Like, been run over, we call it disrupted. And it was somebody who'd been ran over on an expressway that it was called to, and I was with him, and he said, you know, do you want to come with me to this, or do you want to go back to the station, because it's a sight to see. And I remember going, and this guy had his head run over, basically, by a van at 50 miles an hour, and so his brain and skull smashed, splattered 20 metres across the road. It's like middle of the night. And he gave me one of them paper suits. They gave me a pair of tweezers and a bag and said, right, anything bigger than a millimetre, pick up.
Oh, wow.
Bits of brain, bits of skull. And I'm 19 doing that. And I did it. I just carried on as normal. We were there for about an hour, 2 hours. Then carried on, like doing my shifts, doing my uni course over the next few weeks. But then I started out, I didn't know they were actually a real thing, flashbacks. But because obviously when I'd done the thing with the tweezers picking up what had been splattered, the undertaker's turned up and like the main bulk of his body, I saw him, and it was a hell of a sight to see because there was like a sort of a slit across his forehead and it was empty, but you could see it was empty. But his eyes were open, and I'd never seen a dead body at this point, I don't think. And it was just sort of as if he's had that moment of shock before he's died, sort of looking.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously 2-3 weeks later, you know, if anyone's ever had flashbacks, it's like you can remember something, remember an image, but with flashback, it's for that split second, you're there, you're not here. It's like suddenly this thing comes over you, you see what you saw, you can hear what you saw. It was a cold night, you feel cold, you can smell what you smell. And that sort of surprised me that happened, but it kept happening. So, to be fair, the police helped me with that because I said, this has happened and I don't know how to deal with it. And they gave me some therapy. I think it was a form of hypnosis, like in the basis of it, where they transfer something that you've experienced from your short-term memory into your long-term memory. I remember speaking to a woman who did it. She said she's had like Falklands War veterans, which that was 30 years ago, but for them it's today. They're there. We were there yesterday. And it worked. And now if I sit and try and imagine the image of that man lying there, I can't. Even though I know I've seen it, I can say his eyes were open and stuff. But it's almost, like she said, if you dream something and then you forget it, that's what they do to your brain in that therapy. So I was lucky that I got help, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very effective, that therapy. What about the next incident that you went out to that was shocking like that?
Well, there were quite a few, to be honest. Like I say, I did it full-time for 2 or 3 years, fully, 40 hours a week, and a lot of them blended into one. I never went to anything like that again. I never went to a murder, but I went to an attempted murder, it was. And it was the most unassuming people you'd ever see. It was just this 50-year-old lady who lived in a house with her mum. And it was a nice house. They were like well-dressed people. But it was like a mum and a daughter, and the daughter had rang the police saying, "Oh, I've just hit my mum over head with whatever it was, blunt object. And she's unconscious on the floor." And we turn up, and it's just this nice house, and the daughter looks a bit like, you know, your favourite auntie, you know, your grandmother, just nice, friendly woman. And we realised, like, oh, this could be an attempted murder, this. They said, I think the paramedics were there and said, oh, she's got a fractured skull, definitely, the mum. But the daughter, like, confessed to me, and I had to record it down, I remember that. Like I say, it's still 19, 20, quite a big responsibility. She might, you know, if she does pass away, which she didn't, luckily, you know, I might have this confession. Yeah. I remember dealing with that. Like I say now, it was 7 years since I left, like, the policing world, and I've kind of tried to leave it behind in my mind. But yeah, I'll still speak to people full-time police officers who were on that team, and even those who volunteer, they do sort of regard me as one of the team. So I don't know if that's something I did or reflection on me. I'm not sure.
It's incredibly young, isn't it, to witness?
Yeah.
Your own brain's only just developing as a 19-year-old.
Well, like I say, a year ago, I was in sixth form college, just doing my A-levels, just, you know, doing my own thing. I was doing a little Saturday job. And then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I'm there, picking up somebody's brain. And like I say, it's from somebody who never wanted to join the police, never wanted to do any job like that, never even thought jobs like that existed. Even when the first few months as being a special, I didn't think that was something to be expected to do.
Baptism of fire.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Were you attacked while you were a special constable?
Oh, yeah. Well, like I say, I started in Widnes, then I moved to Warrington, and a big part of it was the nighttime economy. You know, so Friday, Saturday night, we're there at the clubs at kicking out time. So obviously people are fighting each other. Then we try and intervene. They're fighting us. So that was nearly a weekly occurrence. Seeing colleagues getting assaulted, people, glass bottles smashed over people's heads. Like I was 19 years old. I was only just old enough to go out drinking myself. But I'm there with people 30, 40 years old fighting. Eye-opener, definitely. Like I say, I was very described as shy in school and stuff. I was quite a quiet person, so I wasn't the outgoing sort. So even when I turned 18, I wasn't going to clubs, wasn't going out drinking. But then I'm seeing this world through like another window, from the other side. And yeah, it was definitely character building, yeah. It's made me who I am today, I think, being a special, definitely.
What about like fear and vulnerability when it's kicking off like that every weekend? Have you just got to internalize it and just put
But you do, I've heard a lot of people say, you do get addicted to the adrenaline. Like, so if you hear a call saying, oh, there's people fighting over there, you get this hit of adrenaline. So you don't really feel like, oh, am I going to get hurt? What do we do? You just sort of feel like, wow, exciting thing happening, let's go and deal with it. Like I say, it's only 2-3 weeks later, you get a bit of a come down and reflect back what you've dealt with. And that's when you sort of think, wow, I'm really doing this,
And when you were that age, did you ever think, I'm not going to carry on with this? Or did you just...
Oh, no, I was
keep
determined
going?
the whole time. And I was applying to join the police full time as a special. And I never made it, basically. Which is obviously further down the road why I thought, well, if I can't be a police officer, perhaps I could be a prison officer.
Right.
But yeah, I was applying and going for interviews, passed assessments to be a full-time officer. It never put me off for things I saw. I just thought, well, I'm a volunteer doing this. I'd like to actually do it for real.
Did you ever get injured?
I never got seriously injured, anything like that, no. Like I say, the only thing was sort of that mental injury. And I was looking away because I saw other officers get injured.
What did you see?
Well, there was one particular Saturday night, there was a group of people fighting who'd come out of a nightclub. And I saw it and said to another officer, oh, we've got to deal with that. And so I ran over, tried to grab hold of this lad, and he escaped my grip, he ran off. And then there was another officer further down the street who sort of intercepted him. And I think he sort of got hold of him, tried to tackle him, but this officer ended up, I don't know if this lad pushed him, I think he did. And he hit his head on the wall, like a brick wall, this other officer.
Oof.
And I think, I can't, like I say, the adrenaline goes, he might have kicked me, punched me when I grabbed him. And I heard him say over the radio, the CCTV operator in the town, to the inspector or the sergeant who was at the station saying, we've got 2 officers assaulted, I think one's got a bad head injury. And he did. Hours later, he had a big lump on his head, this other officer. I obviously felt a bit of guilt about that because I thought, oh, well, I tried to grab that guy and he ran off and assaulted him. And then there was another occasion, me and another officer were guarding, I think he was a teenager at a hospital. I don't know if it was a mental health incident or he'd been kicking off at home, parents had thrown him out. And he was calm at first, but he was getting more and more agitated, saying, I want to go home, why can't I go home? Trying to stand up, open the door to walk out. So he was saying, no, sit down, because he was under arrest for whatever it was, criminal damage of his mum's house or something. And then he was getting more and more agitated as time went on. And so we called the hospital security to come and assist us because this was Friday, Saturday night. All the other officers are committed dealing with stuff. And when the hospital security came, I don't know if it was a sight of him set this kid off. And he just started, I don't know if he went for the security officer, I can't remember. But we were trying to restrain him and he was struggling. I don't know if he was on drugs or anything. I think he might have been because, you get that superhuman strength, you say. And he managed to break free. And he runs off through the hospital through A&E. So we're chasing him. And then we've actually asked for other officers who are out about, can you come around the hospital, look for this person? And they arrived in a car. I think it was one of the sergeants, actually. He got out his car, saw this lad running towards him. So tried to, restrain him, tackle him. And he did. But the lad, I don't know what he did, kicked him or threw something at him, whatever. He broke the sergeant's leg. Completely broke it. Oof. And he was off work for 6 to 8 months after that point. So, again, I felt a pang of guilt from that, thinking he got away from us. That's happened. Again, it sounds strange to say, but, it's the nature of a job. I'm not saying these things happen, they shouldn't happen, but we're in that environment. We're dealing with people who want to get away from us, don't want to be with us, but they need to be because we committed a crime or the danger to themselves, other people. And it is a lot to process as a 19-year-old lad.
It's a huge amount to process.
Tell you what, Dave, I wasn't expecting it to get this hard hitting so fast. And, in the prison service, you keep the bad guys inside. But NordVPN, they keep the bad guys outside of your devices. So with NordVPN, you can watch my Sons of Ecstasy documentary if you're in the UK, even though it's only available in America, using the Quick Connect. See, I've got it on my phone right here. Plus, as you know, I've been hacked. I've lost my YouTube channel multiple times. NordVPN protects you from multiple types of assault. You can become safer online with a single click. Stay safe from scams, phishing, and malware with Threat Protection Pro. Never stop with the fastest VPN on the market. Threat Protection Pro has protected hundreds of millions of people from attacks. Someone sent me an email pretending to be a sponsored ad and I clicked on it and it was a phishing attack, and that's how I lost my channel. I wish I had Threat Protection Pro at that point. If the hackers have got your info on the dark web, Nord will monitor it for you and alert you. So you can get 4 months extra on a 2-year plan at nordvpn.com/Attwood, ATTwood. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/Attwood. Link is in the description box if you're watching this on YouTube. Thank you for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
You sound like so committed to those early years. You were dead young, even like the fact that you're saying, I felt guilty when I couldn't, interject with somebody else. And you said earlier you felt completely part of the team.
Yeah.
And yet you also said, I never made it to the place that I wanted to go. What was the barrier?
I've got theories in my head because I passed everything to become a full-time police officer. I passed the assessment centres and the final interview to the point whereby the only thing getting me into the police would be the background checks for vetting. So there's no issue with all that. None of my family have been involved in criminality. We check, are you part of like political groups that are radical? None of that. If anyone's got any, say, gambling issues, anything like that, none of that. And then I got an email one day saying, as you passed your final interview, we're aware of that. But because of, I can't remember, it said because of a budget cut or because of something that's happened in the government, we're only taking people who passed the final interview with, say, 60% or more, and you got 59%. So although I passed everything, they'd made up this rule whereby they're just taking a certain type of person.
Yeah. That must have been quite hard to get that news after being so committed, so young.
No one had done everything. And
you'd done everything right.
If I did want to join the police, I'd have to go through it all again. And I felt like, well, I don't have to. And I think one of the sergeants of my response team as a special said, he's passed everything. What's the barrier? And I remember somebody joining joining the team as a new full-time officer. And he left after a few weeks because he didn't like it. And I'm certainly not calling him, but I think it wasn't up to the job. So the sergeant said, well, you took him on and he's gone and we've got Dave here who's doing the job. He knows what to do. He's got everything. All you need to do is give him a wage and he can take his place. And we said no. So
you've done all that voluntary commitment.
Well, 4 years. Oh
my God.
Yeah.
That's got to.
And 2 of those years was 40 hours a week. I didn't get any money. I didn't even claim expenses when I could have. I never got a penny for it.
Seems pretty unjust.
Alongside the rest of my life, I had a part-time job as well. I remember doing the stupid things you do when you're 19, 20. I'd do a night shift policing, say 10 p.m. till 7 a.m. I went at 9 a.m. I'd go to work.
Wow.
Like my actual paid job for the day. I remember one day, I think I started on Sunday, I didn't go to bed till Wednesday because I was doing that, which was stupid and it was going to make me ill. I could have killed myself.
The burnout must have been.
Yeah. But like I say, that's how much I wanted it. And that's how ingrained, I don't know if it was institutionalised, but I just thought, this is my life, this is what I've got to do. They say if you want to achieve something, nothing will stop you. You've got to be willing to do anything. So that was me. I thought, right, well, I've just got to crack on with it.
We relate to that burnout from our raving
Yeah,
days, don't we?
Yeah, we absolutely do.
So, all right. So, what then made you go over to the prisons?
Well, obviously, that happened. That was the time when we said we're only taking this certain category of people, above, say, 60% who've passed the interview. I thought that was my third time of applying. You know, that wasn't the first time. You know, in previous times, I'd perhaps passed the assessment, but not the final interview, or not got to the assessment, different stages. But this time, I'd, you know, after 4 years of, so like say, that commitment, that doing 40 hours a week, everyone's got sort of a breaking point where they think, you know, no, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
I can't keep doing this. But then towards, so this is say 2018, when that happened, I found out I wasn't getting in full time. A complaint was received from somebody who I'd arrested, basically saying he felt it was unlawful, and he's meant to be ILPC, the police watchdog, and we were called to court to deal with this, you know, the complaint, and we all gave statements in court, all the officers, and on the day, something just didn't feel right. I'd given evidence in court before, and everything had been fine, but the judge was kind of off, the most abrupt one I've seen before. He wasn't the usual one in the area, which, like I say, shouldn't mean anything because we're doing the same job, we're impartial, court of law. And whilst in court, he basically accused me of lying, this judge, about the sequence of events that had happened when we'd arrested this man. And obviously that's a serious thing, it's perjury. So the case was sort of thrown out. And then obviously, because you're special in the police, the internal professional standards of the police have then got to investigate you and say, well, you brought the police into disrepute, you possibly committed a criminal offence by lying in court. And so that started a whole other process where we had to give more statements. And it culminated in, I was interviewed under caution, I wasn't arrested, but they called me in and said, you know, they didn't say you need to get a solicitor, but they said you're being interviewed under caution, like a voluntary interview. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to get, like I say, I was there at the end, 23 maybe. And you could get a free solicitor through some police charity. Like I say, it's a serious thing. I was looking it up, Googling it and thinking, well, I could get 7 years in prison if you find me guilty of perjury. Like, what's happening? My life's over.
That must have been a terrifying experience.
Oh, yeah. It was awful. And then I attended this interview, and the result was no further action was taken. It was found that I didn't lie. I think the result was I'd got perhaps mixed up or missaid something or got the order chronologically wrong of what we said to this man or like when we saw him, but wasn't intentionally trying to mislead anyone in the court or, you know, I didn't make anything up that didn't happen. And that was like the nail in the coffin then. I tried to get in full time in the police, couldn't get in, and then this had happened. So obviously I'm thinking, right, there's something against me here, there's something telling me this isn't for me, you know, time for change. So
that's like a lot of disappointment and stress.
Oh yeah.
All at the same time.
Something that seemed so promising at first.
Yeah.
You know, I thought, you know, I'll do this uni course, be a full-time police officer. I was enjoying it. And I thought, well, this is something I could do till I retire, till I'm in my 60s, 70s. And then, like I say, after 4 years, it ended on a bad note.
Yeah.
But so I left being a special in 2018, but in 2017, I had applied to be a prison officer. I don't know if it's just, I have random thoughts sometimes, oh, I'll send an application off for that. And I sent the initial application form off, and they sent something back saying, do you want to come do an assessment day? And I never went. I just thought, no, I'm going to stick to my policing. And then obviously all that happened in the police. So I thought, well, there was that I did last year, and they sent me a thing back saying, do you want to come for an assessment at the prison service? So I thought I might go for that again, take it a bit more seriously. So I went online and I saw HMP Styal were taking on, because in the prisons, I think years ago, we called it national recruitment. So you applied to the prison service, you did your training, and they said where you were going. So I'm from the northwest, but we could say, right, you're going to Kent, you're going to London, but you applied to a particular prison. So I applied for Styal. You had to do some sort of online, like watch a video. How would you deal with this? Fill in your basic details, answer some questions, and then invite you to an assessment day where you do a very basic maths and English test, which I thought was too basic. It was like, you've got 10 prisoners on an exercise yard, 2 go to the gym, how many's left?
Wow.
So, well, it's not really taxing. Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast. It's a word from my sponsor, Shopify. When I started this podcast, there were a lot of things I had to figure out on my own. Algorithms, guest booking, marketing. I was a bit naive about what was involved, and as you get deeper into it, it starts to overwhelm your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started, such as my co-host Ron's Pokemon business. Get started with your own design studio, hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/Shaun, SHAUN. Go to shopify.co.uk/Shaun, shopify.co.uk/Shaun. Link in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Thanks for supporting our sponsor. Back to the podcast.
You do 4 role play assessments. So you basically go into a room, there's a camera at the back of a room, recording everything, and there's somebody in the room who is like an actor or prison officer who's volunteered for the day, and they're presenting something to you. Either they're being aggressive, shouting at you, or they're not, but they're asking you to say, they're not letting me in to visit so-and-so, can you give this to him? And they're just basically seeing how you deal with conflict, or, you know, how switched on you are, your interpersonal skills, how you talk to people. And then after that day, you go away. And there's no actual interview to become a prison officer. I'm not sure if there is now. I'm aware that was the case for quite a long time, which baffled me. Because surely they want to know what that person's about they're taking on. And then basically you find out, right, you've passed the assessment. We'll do our background checks. We'll get everything set up and you can come in to the prison. So this is 2018, I think I did the assessment, say September time. I left the Special Constabulary in about October. And then in December, I still remember a specific day. I think it was like 10th of December 2018. Somebody said, come to HMP Styal before you start, have a look round. We'll show you the place. We'll tell you a bit about what the job is. And like I say, I've never been in a prison before at that point. And obviously I've seen prisons on TV and in movies and stuff. And if anyone's been to Styal, I know you said you've been.
Yeah.
You walk in and you think, hang on, this is what I expected.
Let me just clarify, because the viewers are going to think you've
Oh, yeah.
you can't see it. Lorna is a wonderful woman who helps prisoners, kids, and through charitable means, and gives them support and helps them do the visits with the family members. And she's been doing this for a very long time. She wasn't a convict. Let's just clarify.
But I did spend a lot of time in Styal doing research and supporting young people. But yes, interestingly, Styal was the first prison I went into as well. And you're right, it used to be a children's orphanage.
It was originally,
It was originally an orphanage, so it doesn't look and feel like a prison.
No, it's like a little village, like a little town. It's almost like universities with like housing blocks. You walk in and it's just like this. It's just off a main road near some farms, and there's just like 3 streets of these big Victorian houses.
Yeah.
Sort of with a fence round. And then at the bottom there's like a traditional prison wing and a segregation unit. But I walked in and I saw people who I thought must be prisoners just wandering about. You know, they weren't being escorted by staff. They weren't They didn't look like they're going anywhere. We're just having a vape, walking around, chatting. So I thought, hang on, what's this? I thought it was going into like porridge or something, or all wings and everyone's locked up. And obviously Styal's women's prison. And in this country, women's prisons are unique in many ways, because with male prisons, you've got all the different categories. So you've got like category A, which is high profile prisoners, to category D, which are open prisoners. But in women's, we still have the categories, but everybody's sort of together.
Yeah.
Because there's less women's prisoners, female prisoners, and there's less women's prisons as a result of that. So young offenders and adults are together. People who do offences which are, towards children are mixed in with people who are in for drugs offences or theft or murder, anything like that. But the big thing that shocked me was they have a mother and baby unit there, where I think it's from towards the end of your pregnancy up until the baby's 18 months old.
Yeah.
The prisoner can live with the baby. But like I say, it's like 3 street style of houses. And this mother and baby unit was on the same sort of street as one of the houses, which housed mainly people who'd killed kids and babies.
Yeah.
And they were pushing babies in prams past this house. And I just thought, no, this is not what I expected.
Yeah. There's like a lifer's house, isn't there? And then there was like...
Yeah. But it's all... It was just bizarre, not what I expected at all. So I thought, well, I'm gonna do it. I've got a paid job. I was doing the police involuntary. I'm gonna stick to it, do the training, come back, just throw myself in. So from that point, that was sort of day just to look around. I then got given an option. Either you do a 10-week training course and then you go live as an officer in the prison, or you can do 2 months as we call it, an operational support grade in the prison, which does everything in the background. So prison officers deal with prisoners. The operational support staff deal with everything else. So the physical security of the prison, they read the mail, they let visitors in, supervise the visits, sort out all the deliveries, escort all the vehicles around the prison. So I thought, well, I might as well do that because I'll get paid for it. Plus, I'll get to learn my way around the prison, know some faces, see what goes on behind the scenes before I go in. So that's what I did. And my starting date, very randomly, was the 24th of December, 2018, Christmas Eve. That was my first paid day. And I thought, what's going on here? And they gave me Christmas Day off, but then I was in the next day. And everyone was like, well, who's this? Why have you started you today? It's Christmas Eve. But it's not. Obviously the staff are not more lax, but, we go to work at Christmas. Everybody's got Christmas jumpers on, having fun and that. And then I'm there, like, brand new uniform, fresh face. What am I doing? You want to chill out a bit, sort of at work at Christmas, but then I'm the new boys there, and we've got to show him around.
And did you get like keys like early on?
Well, day one, basically, to get the keys, they just sort of sit you down and show you like a PowerPoint presentation printed out of this key does this key does that. Don't do this, don't lose your keys. And we didn't get given keys.
Yeah, they don't lose your keys is a big one.
Don't give them to a prisoner. Yeah, it's not, big and flash and tests and exams and stuff. It's just, don't be stupid.
I was surprised. I got given keys early on as a researcher, and I was young. And I was like, that literally, like, it felt like a really short training experience. And then suddenly I've got keys that open doors to the whole prison.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility, and it just feels so bizarre, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah. Well, I'd say by this point, I'm 23, 24, and I've done that 4 years as special, so I'm a bit more switched on. I'm a bit more, like, aware of the world. I'd met different types of people in the police, so I've seen people join the prison service who are quite naive, and that's the first job. They've never dealt with conflict before. It all set me up quite well being a special, because I knew what to watch out for. I knew when people were trying to perhaps manipulate me. Obviously, when prisoners see a new face, they're fascinated, they want to test you out. And particularly in a female prison, they try and work the charm on you sometimes, female prisoners. And they try and sort of sweet talk you to get things and all of this. But I was switched on to, deal with that. But I think it was maybe a bit too much because I was shut down completely. And any time a prisoner spoke to me initially, before Because before I did the training as a prison officer, I was meeting prisoners doing this operational job. And they were speaking to me, and I was just being very robotic, I think, saying, no, you can't do that. Not starting a conversation, getting to know them, or yes, you can do that. Or, and I think that's sort of the shadow of the police officer in me.
So did it take a while to sink in then?
Yeah.
Accepted?
I learned pretty much early on that you're dealing with criminals, but you're not the police, because prison's its own sort of world. And whereas the police are there to sort of lock people up and that's it done with, you don't meet that person again. You're meeting the same people every day. It's like its own self-contained world. It's almost like you're the occupying force and they're the natives, the prisoners. But that's like harsh. You have to sort of integrate to a point, but keep a line.
And what were the biggest challenges to you to integrate?
I think it was, well, the amount of stuff you got to learn. Because the training course for a prison officer is useless. I don't know how it is now. It's 10 weeks. And we didn't actually go into a prison in the training course. We did some little role play things, but they teach you basically about, different behavioural rewards you give to prisoners, different punishments that happen to prisoners, how prisons work, some laws. But you don't actually learn how to talk to people or what prisoners are going to come to you with, or because that's what your job as prison officer is. You're dealing with prisoners' problems all day, but they never taught us what the problems might be and how to solve them. They never really taught us how a regime would work in a prison, so like I say, at Styal, we've got the wing and we've got the house blocks. There's different regimes, and then the segregation unit, there's different times things happen.
Yeah.
And so if you're not taught it and you get sent somewhere, because you're not given, you're working on my house, you're working on the wing, you could be somewhere different every day, or you could be somewhere in the morning, somewhere in the afternoon. And you've got to sort of work out what's going on, because everybody else is just on autopilot doing the job. But you're saying, well, what do we do next? What do we do now? But then you've got that thing in your head saying, I'm mithering, I'm being a bit of a burden to like the other officers. And they're friendly enough, they're happy to help you because they've all been there. But you've got that conflict of, I've got to learn what to do, but I don't want to annoy my colleagues by seeming stupid. So it's quite a shock to the system.
What kind of problems were the female prisoners coming at you with?
Just all sorts of things from minor to major, to be honest. As, people do, arguments happen. Like I say, in the houses, uniquely at Styal, whereas on a wing, you might have 1-2 prisoners maximum locked in a cell. On the house blocks, the front door of a house is locked, but then 20 women are living together. Like, they've got free roam of house. We don't have a time to get locked in the room. So obviously conflicts happen. So they might come into you saying, oh, she's bullying me, she's done this, she's done that. And I don't know who to believe, because I've got that thing in my head from policing and from my training thinking, well, is everybody lying to me? Somebody's telling the truth. Who do I believe? Do I take what one person says seriously when actually it could be reverse? They could be just, putting the flame off themselves onto someone else. So you've got to do a bit of digging sometimes and, look into... I didn't like looking at what people are in prison for, but you've got to look at, is this person a staff manipulator? Is this person, speak to other staff and say, have they got form for causing trouble? It could be a completely peaceful house block, but this person causes trouble. And it's hard because you go from 10 weeks training where you don't get taught anything to you sat on that house block and you're responsible for them 25 women. You're responsible, keep them safe, make sure they get fed, make sure they get medication, because like a lot of them have substance misuse issues. So obviously if they don't get the medication, that's a problem. But then because of perhaps the background, how they've grown up, they're not the most, organised of people. So if they don't go for the medication, they come to you and say, oh, I've not had my methadone, whatever it is. And it's like, well, I understand you need it, but, you're an adult, you've not gone for it, you knew when it was coming. The nurse won't give it to you now. But then as for uniform, you're the one getting, well, if I've not had this, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hurt myself, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. Did you see a lot of self-harm Just,
Oh, definitely, yeah. In style, in women's prisons, I think across the board, is a major issue. Because like with female prisoners, I don't know statistics or anything, but a lot of high majority of female prisoners have been abused as kids, victims of domestic violence, have had awful lives, and
Yeah.
the coping mechanism is so fine. So we saw all sorts. People had cut themselves. People had insert things into themselves. Like there was one woman who used to put pens inside her arm. She'd just stick a full pen in her arm into her veins. You saw people they were like bad describing them, characters on a horror film. Just faces covered in slashes and scars and all of this because they've been years self-harming.
yeah.
They've destroyed themselves really. And like I say, as a prison officer, it's something that's talked about in the news and stuff. You don't get mental health training. You're taught sort of tick box things, how a prison works, what your job is. But mental health, you don't get any training at all. You don't even know the names of some of the mental health issues that these people have, diagnoses like, bipolar or schizophrenia. You don't know what those things mean, but, some people have got everything
Yeah.
because of how awful their life's been. And then, obviously, that mental health is perhaps why they've done what they've done, ended up in prison.
Yeah.
So
and all
the-
the abuse they've
yeah.
suffered. I really relate to that. I remember going into Styal as a researcher, and I was going in just to interview people, but nobody told me about I'd be interviewing people and there'd just be like blood dripping out of their
Yeah.
arms because they'd just self-harmed. I'd be like, oh gosh, let's stop the interview so that you can get some help. But it was so normalised.
Oh, yeah.
It was so normalised that you become desensitized to seeing.
You do become desensitised. Like the first few times, it's like a procedure of how to deal with a self-harm incident. Like you've got to tell the nurse, you've got to tell the officer in charge. And, you've got to say certain things on the radio, for example. And the first few times you do it, you're like, oh, self-harm incident, we've got to do this, this and this. And then 6 months down the line, it sounds awful to say because it's a horrible thing, but somebody's self-harming. You just become, oh, she's done it again. Oh, there's another one. We had 6 today, another one.
Yeah.
But that's just sort of conditioning. It's not, you recognise it as bad as it is as a thing to do. It doesn't lessen, how serious self-harm is, but you become institutionalised as much as the prisoners do.
Yeah.
As a staff member then going in, did they try and manipulate you?
I possibly, yes, and I was young as well. I was in my early 20s, so I was going in to just listen to their stories, but I didn't obviously expect the stories that I got. I thought I was going in with one agenda and came out with a completely different one. But obviously, you've got women crying, telling you, please help me with this, please help me with this. Somebody's done this to me, exactly how you were saying. And you sort of running around going, oh my God, we need to help this person. And then other officers or people that work there will just be like, oh, they're just saying it or they're making it up. You just got to ignore it. And it is a lot because you do take it home and you worry and, or people would ask you things that you just physically can't help with, like, miss, can you help me with my housing? I need this, I need that. And you don't really know where to go to help them. And I actually remember interviewing someone, and again, weirdly, sticking the pens down the vein was something that I saw. So
it's something apparently that's quite common, but I don't know if it's some kind of mental thing. I don't know.
You saw them do it, or you saw the aftermath?
I saw it was just a thing. It was like people just, I remember them saying to me, just be really careful about, don't leave any biro lids anywhere because they'll use that as a, and I saw the aftermath. And I remember going into doing one-to-one interview with a woman. The blood was coming out of her arm. I was like, let's stop. And she was like, no, carry the interview on. I want to tell my story. But I'm saying to this other officer, this woman needs help. And it was like, she'll be all right. She does it every day. And it's a hard.
It can make you question yourself at times because you think, am I a horrible person? Thinking, oh, she's done it again today. When you think, well, could I really go the extra mile and try and help her?
Yeah.
But then, like you say, a prisoner will come to you and say, oh, can you help me with my housing? Or can you sort this? I'm being released next week. We've got nowhere to live. So then I'd say, right, yeah, I'll go and ring up the housing people who are based in the prison and they've gone home early or something like that.
Yeah.
So then you go back to the prisoner and say, right, I've tried to ring him. You know, I'm not just saying I'll do something for you, not coming back to you, but they've gone home for the day. And I'd like to help you, but I can't. So in that prisoner's mind, then you've not helped them, when actually it's for housing people who haven't helped them, but you're the face of the system.
You feel powerless.
Yeah, you feel powerless, yeah.
Most of the time. Because I remember running a focus group, and we had this idea of an intervention we could put into place in Styal. And I don't really remember the ins and outs of the group, but I remember specifically the women saying, are we definitely going to do this? Because do you know how many times we're promised we're going to have something and then it never happens? So are we actually going to do this thing that you're suggesting?
Yeah.
And, you know, we did trial it, but you do think they were just like, everybody always comes in and says they're going to do something and then they never do.
We learn early on the cardinal sin as a prison officer is don't promise a prisoner something and not do it.
Yeah.
And I did slip up early on where a prisoner would ask me to do something, you know, on a busy wing, 90 prisoners, and I'd say, yeah, I'll do that for you. And then you'd get caught up just in the day, hours would pass. And then at the end of the shift, a prisoner would come to you and say, have you done that for me? And I can't remember what you asked me. And I sort of let that show on my face. And I just sort of went, no, you just like all the rest. So that was a learning experience for later on, you know, a few years into my career. If a prisoner asked me something, my answer would then be, if I can do it, I'll do it. If I don't come back to you, that means I've not been able to do it. You know, if I can't sort it, I'll try and come back to you and tell you that I've tried. But I never made a promise. Again, I said I'll do it if I can. You know, if I don't come back to you, I've not done it. And, you know, you do have to learn that the hard way. But like you say, the people living in and out of prison, perhaps all their lives, and they're promised every time they come in prison, said, oh, you're going to get help. And they don't. And that might be 20 years.
Even before they went to prison, I would say that most of the women who've ended up in prison have had a lifetime of abuse or neglect or people wanting to be helped and not being helped, which is, you know, I'm not saying it's for every female prisoner, but there's obviously a high proportion of women who are just vulnerable.
Yeah, obviously.
I've never had anyone there's no trust in anything.
No, well, especially, you know, in a women's prison, I'm a man. And some of the women in prison, a lot of them haven't had good experiences with men. And for very good reasons, they don't trust men at all. So when I'm there, telling them to do something or perhaps forgetting to do something they've asked for help with, then it's just adding to what they believe. It's reinforcing their life, you know, or not bothering with men. But then if there's only male staff on their wing that day, then, you know, they're going to withdraw into themselves. They might get worse. They might stuff them. And it's nothing you've done, but you feel like powerless. So
do you have to become immune to it? The demands on you are so overwhelming.
Yeah, you have to find a way of coping with it. Because, like, sometimes, you know, you'll be on that loud wing all day, 12-hour shift, but your ears will be ringing. And when you get in your car at the end of the day and it'll be silent. And it's like, it must be like people who've gone to perform at concerts for in a big stadium, thousands of people, and then they're in a hotel room silent on their own. And so you have to learn just to have 10 minutes of just thinking, right, that was my day. Whoa.
I don't think people understand the din of a prison. How would you describe it?
Oh, yeah, it's like you say, when you walk onto a prison wing, they've got a certain smell, a certain noise, a certain sort of presence you can feel, you know, not your hair stand on end, but you just get this atmosphere. And you can't put it into words, but, you know, if you were to play the sound now of a prison wing, I could tell you, you know, that's prison. You know, as opposed to like a crowd of people at a football match, I can tell you that's a prison wing. It's just something so unique about it.
And were there times when those sounds weren't the usual sounds and they signal something to you was about to happen? Oh,
yeah, well, you could tell if prisoners were up to something, say if, you know, a lot of prisoners running around whispering to each other in small groups, or prisoners who you normally saw, you know, out and about weren't there. And perhaps you knew something had happened the day before, say you'd seen two prisoners arguing, and then you saw the one prisoner who they were arguing with sort of hanging around their cell with like a group of the mates, you'd think, oh, something's going on. So you learn to sort of read people and watch, and like I say, you can't describe it. We can walk onto a wing. A lot of people tell you this and say, you know, it's going to be a good day or a bad day. Just when you walk in the morning, what does it sound like? You know, Is it loud? Is it quiet? Is it in between?
You feel
can just
it
tell,
in the
yeah.
air. You feel
Yeah.
it, don't you?
It's just sort of premonition saying it's going to kick off today, or it's going to be just a run-of-the-mill day.
Yeah.
Did it kick off while you were there, Lorna?
Yeah,
Did it?
probably the first day that I ever went. The houses are very different, aren't they, to the wings? But the very first day that I went on into Styal, I got taken onto the wing and it kicked off. I was like, what on earth? Where the hell am I? There were people like obviously rattling the doors. And it was just a few women round like a pool table. There was this really vulnerable girl. She was kind of like androgynous looking. And I remember the staff saying, you know, she doesn't know if she's a boy or a girl. And you could see that she kind of taken a lot of drugs. And there was a fight with her and about 3 other women. I'd only been on the wing about 5 minutes. Somebody was asking me about housing. I didn't know anything about housing. And then I was like, oh, hi, really naive, trying to introduce myself. And then all of a sudden, and I was actually speaking to this girl. We were sitting on a couch and she was somebody I was due to interview in the next few weeks. So I was trying to introduce myself, but you could see how she was ill. She was an ill person. And then she went off to do something. And then at the end of the very end of that wing on the ground floor, I was talking to whoever was escorting me at the time. I hadn't got keys at that point. It just kicked off, this fight. I don't know what started it, but obviously all officers had to swoon in and I was just like bustled to one side. That was a scary introduction.
Because women can fight as well.
Did you get assaulted?
I did, yeah. I think it was a few months into the job. I was based on the wing initially at first. Like I say, you could end up different places of prison due to staffing, you know, from say one day to the next. But predominantly it was on the wing. And I mentioned before these act documents. In a male prison on a wing, you might have 2 of these documents. So 2 prisoners who need checking at certain intervals because they're risk to themselves. But say on a wing of 70 prisoners at Styal, you could have 50 of these documents. So that's 50 prisoners who are, you know, need keeping an eye on because they could hurt themselves. And because there was that many of them, one officer on the wing was given in the morning. Like, so you had one officer who was the movements officer who ticked off people who go to the workplaces, who go to appointments. Another officer was just general patrolling the wing, answering the call bells in the cell. And then one officer was just act officer. So you've got these 50 people. Some need checking every 2 hours, some every 10 minutes. And that's all you're doing all day. And because, you know, another thing you learn as a prison officer is, you know, when the prisoners are unlocked, don't be sat in the office on the computer. So I made a point of taking all the documents out onto the landing and filling them in on there because I thought, well, I can see all the prisoners. I don't have to run around and check them. I can look, oh, she's there, she's fine, she's doing this. But then I didn't sort of think it was kind of a hard learning experience. Prisoners on these documents don't want other prisoners to know that they're subject to them. And there's one particular prisoner who I knew to keep an extra eye on when she was unlocked because she could be unpredictable. She never done anything bad to me, but she had a few fights on the wing. She was in for quite a violent offence as well. And she was always on quite high intervals of being checked because she was prolific self-harmer. And I'm stood at sort of on the second landing, sort of looking down the whole length of the wing, and she comes from this way. And then she sort of walks behind me, and I don't think anything of it. I think, oh, I've seen her. She's fine, I'll write down. And then I feel just in my back, just this, like thumping me back. So it was like someone hit me in the back, someone's hit me with something. And I heard, as that happened, I heard sort of a mumble saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing them on the landing. It was this prisoner telling me, you know, writing her document. And so I thought, well, she punched me, she had, because she nearly knocked me over the thing I was leaning on. So I turned around and, you know, took hold of her and shouted for help. Other officers came, restrained this prisoner, took her to the segregation unit. But then I don't know if it's very old-fashioned sort of thinking. You think, well, and it's like falsely macho. You think, oh, as a man, a woman's assaulted me, punched me. You know, what does that mean? How are my colleagues going to see me? You know, and then obviously you get, you know, any incident in a prison, we do like a debrief. So you sit down with the manager, whoever was there, and we say, right, what happened? Why did it happen? And I explained. And I could feel sort of from the management that they were thinking, oh, you could have dealt with that better, or you could have done this. Did she actually hit you? It's like, well, I've not seen the CCTV. Apparently it doesn't look like much on the footage. Like she hasn't done anything, like she just tapped me. But I know how it feels if somebody taps me. I know how it feels if somebody punches me. And I was adamant that she'd punch me. And we was sort of on the fence for management saying, yeah, well, you're saying this, but, you know, she is how she is, she's unpredictable. And there's no punishment for that prisoner of it. And I wasn't thinking she's got to be punished because I was new in the job. I didn't really know what had happened to her. But yeah, that was my first time dealing with an incident in prison and realising something quite uncomfortable, that the managers sometimes within a prison, your supervisors aren't always on your side fully. You know, you're under a spotlight. You think, right, I've done the right thing, that's it, I'm trained, I'm qualified.
Yeah.
You know, I'm confident in myself. But then you're being questioned on your own decision making, and it makes you think, am I good at this job? You take it, like you say, you go home and analyse it. Am I doing this job right? Should I be here? Am I in the wrong job? You know, am I going to go in tomorrow and that prisoner's could have told all the other prisoners, oh, he's going to assault you. You know, so it just runs rings around your head.
Yeah. Feeling unsafe isn't necessarily just with the people that are resident there. Feeling unsafe is like a systemic feeling of the whole institution.
Because like I say, I realise then, right, anytime I do, obviously there's cameras in prison, you know, everything you do is filmed, which it should be. But I didn't realise how scrutinised it would be. It's like, could you have done this? Could you have done that? So it's like, well, going off my training, this has happened, and I've took the appropriate steps. Normally, obviously, putting hands on a prisoner is the last resort. And I wasn't. There are some officers like this who come in the morning and say, right, who we restraining today? Who we, you know, having a scrap with today? Rather than actually trying to, you know, speak to them and verbally de-escalate something. But I felt in that moment, and I explained this to the management, right, she'd punch me, I'm pretty sure. The reason I put hands on her straight away is because I've seen her fighting a lot with other prisoners. I know her background. I know she's an unpredictable prisoner. I know she is a danger. I know she is in for a violent offence. You know, she could cause harm. And if she's punched me, I don't know what she's going to do next. Exactly. Like I say, had she got something concealed on her, she could have a blade, she could have anything. She assaulted me, she could assault another member of staff.
How common are weapons in the female prison?
Oh, very common. Because prisoners are ingenious at hiding things. You get taught in the training how to search your cell, for example. But they'll always find somewhere to hide something, whether it's the hollowed out leg of the bed or anything like that. So even if you didn't see weapons on the daily, you knew they were there. There was intelligence coming in, there was whispers. But I'd say more so than men, women fought with their hands when they were fighting. And they're more vicious, to be honest. No, I'm not being misogynistic or anything, but, you know.
There was a lot of biting I saw.
Yeah, hair pulling, scratching. Because men will have a fight, shake hands and say, right, yeah, that's it, sorry. But women will fight and then the next day they'll fight again. They bear a grudge and say, you know, this hasn't been sorted out, get away, you know. And it can just go on and on.
When you were there, was there a lot of women taking, was it Subutex?
Subutex.
Subutex,
yeah,
it's rife.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's a cleaning, it's used for cleaning, isn't it? But they were managing to get Subutex.
I think it is prescribed for something. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's similar to methadone, some addiction thing. But that was like a heavily traded thing, Subutex. It was like, in terms of, you know, like I say, the currency within the prison is vapes. Because there's no money in prison, there's no physical cash, coins. So obviously years and years ago it's tobacco, we traded tobacco. And then we trade vapes because they cost, say a packet of vapes costs £4. So an item that costs £4 would be a packet of vapes. So say, I don't know how we do it, say a gram of Subutex could be like £100. So obviously people who are addicts will say, oh, can I have it on tick, can I owe you? But then obviously debt builds up.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so all these people addicted to drugs, all these people owe debt to someone. That's where the fights come from.
What was the scariest weapons you found?
I never actually found any searching a cell. But part of a sort of induction in every prison, we have a security department. And we have a thing on the wall saying, like, what's been found in the prison. And it baffles you, some of the things that we made. These kitchen knives found in a cell. I've never seen it, but apparently there's a way you can make a gun out of wood or something. There's like fish hook things, just things you could never believe were sort of brought in, concealed that nobody saw it. Tools, hammers, things like that have been found, screwdrivers. A big thing that was dangerous was obviously prisoners were able to clean the cells and clean the wing with mops and brushes. But then they'd get the metal mop pole and sharpen the end, so it's almost like a spear. They're ingenious prisoners. Prisoners are very clever. A lot of people might come into the job and on the outside, might have this thing that, people who are in prison are stupid, uneducated, but not. They're much more intelligent than me, a lot of them. And, some of the most clever people in the world are not as clever as some of these prisoners. The things they come up with, where to hide things, what to use, what to build, when to do certain things.
Well, you've got time to be creative and you're driven because of addiction. So you've got motivation and time, haven't you?
Endless time to come up with things.
Oh, yeah. Well, another thing that was taught is one of the officers I was working with who helped me out a lot, one of the older officers, gave me a bit of sort of wisdom early on. He said, the prisoners have got more time to study you than you've got to study them. So you can read everything you want, you can read the file, you can watch them, but you're there for 12 hours a day, they're there 24 hours a day. You might work here for a year and go, they've been here 20 years. They know everything about how to be a prison officer. They know what shifts you work, they can work it out. They say, oh, he's on today, and we know everything. And if you find little bits like, obviously don't reveal personal information to prisoners, but certain staff, you might say, oh, I went out drinking with Dave last night. Oh, did you? Oh, did you? I mean, they build up a catalogue, almost like a file of each officer.
Yeah.
So, you're on stage, basically. Because
so
you stand out. There's 70 prisoners, there's 3 staff. So you're like the performers, you've got to get everything right. And if you make a little slip up, it's noted,
Were you ever assigned to the visitation?
I was, yeah. It was once a day we had a visiting session in Styal, but obviously different prisoners depending on the behaviour, the sentence. Obviously at Styal as well, they had prisoners on remand, so who weren't technically guilty because they hadn't been to court, but just on remand from court. So they got more visits, people on remand. So they could say see the family every day or every week. But then you had prisoners who perhaps might be behaving poorly or whatever reason it might be. Might have one visit every 6 months. And that visit room's a world of its own. You say prison's a world of its own. That visiting room's something to behold sometimes.
Are they passing packages?
Oh, yeah. Well, they go to new sort of depths of lowness. They'd use babies sometimes, babies' nappies. You've probably heard this, yeah. Obviously, they have toilets for visitors. And perhaps, woman in prison, a child's on the outside. So obviously as an officer, she's saying, oh, can I hold my baby for a minute? Can I hug my baby? But unbeknownst to us, well, we know, but, the visitor has took the baby to the toilet, changed the nappy, say, and they put something, drugs, concealed it on the baby. And as they're cradling them, they're taking it out and concealing it, which is lowest of the low, but, it happens.
So when you say concealing it, just for the viewers, they're putting it in the bodily orifices.
Yeah, or even nappies or anything like that. Oh, the prisoners, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they might then say, oh, can I go to the toilet? Yeah, so they've perhaps got something in the hand that you can't see, and then they'll put it in their orifice, and then when they get back to the cell, they'll take it out.
Are they not strip searched after the visit?
No, they're not strip searched. No, they're rub down search, patted down, but you can only strip search someone if you have reasonable belief that if something is hidden. So if it's not been seen on the camera or you've not seen it, then you can't do it.
Yeah, in the States,
Yeah.
we all get strip searched after every visit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bend over, spread them, cough. Yeah.
Every visit.
Every visit.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it probably does work to a certain degree. I mean, it's the line of, is it degrading, and humanity. But then again, it's, the drug trade. If you don't do that, something gets in, it can start violence, feed addiction. It's a big picture.
Yeah.
The foreskin search was degrading.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did do strip searches, like when prisoners came into reception. Obviously, I didn't do women. This is what sort of going off track a bit when I was in a male prison. And it was all about saying, just peel your foreskin mark, is there anything there? And like I say, that's a very bizarre situation because I'm human. I wouldn't like to be in that situation, but if I don't do it and he's hidden something, it could be anything. Say if it was a phone, he could say, arrange for a blade to come in. If I don't do that, somebody could get hurt.
So was the governor corrupt? Were things getting swept under the carpet?
Oh, yeah, well, like I say, that incident where I was assaulted. I'm adamant that I was. But they just said, oh, no, it's just sort of her. That's what she does. So that, it didn't go on his statistics or anything. It didn't go against the prisoner. And I'm also aware of staff when I was there who were found to be, male staff in the women's prison, who were found to be in intimate relationships, intimate situations with the prisoners who weren't arrested for it, because it's, well, it could be sexual assault, it could be gross misconduct. They were just asked to resign. So nothing gets recorded. When they have a prison inspection, we don't say, oh, this happened. We just say, oh, this member of staff's resigned. So it's very political, I think. It's all to do with statistics. Because if, say, there's a mark against that prison, we won't get as much funding. Perhaps people don't get, I'm being sceptical here, perhaps people don't get as big as bonuses. It's, there is corruption that goes on.
Yeah. And it's impacted by the media. I mean, like prisons, they have their own kind of Ofsted of, whatever it is for, to give them a particular rating. So nobody really wants that.
Well, I saw it on when, some inspections, I think prison inspections should be, the inspectors turn up, boom, you see the prison in full flow. But I don't know if it's changed now. When I was there, they gave them a week, 2 weeks notice saying, right, next week, inspectors coming in. So then you'd see governors walking around and saying to prisoners, say, when the inspectors are here, do not tell them this. When, saying to us as staff, don't mention this, don't mention that. It's like, well, I'm thinking, oh, we'll be all cavalier, I'll say whatever the truth is, but then you're thinking, hang on, I might lose my job. So I don't want to be dishonest, but the fact that that's happening shows something's wrong. Have those governors been told from very high up, that's what you should do?
So when a male staff member is having relationships with a female prisoner, did you ever have suspicions that was going on before these people got moved? Or did they keep it?
I didn't have suspicion that it was going on, but when they said it had happened, when it all came out, you think back and think, oh, well, of course it was, yeah. Because you saw them perhaps in a meeting room together, or you saw them, that prisoner might have been quite sullen and not very talkative to other officers, but with them, I was laughing and joking and pats on the back and all of this. So you can see in hindsight, but a lot of it happened on night shift. Because like I say, during the day, there's perhaps, Styal holds, say, 500 prisoners, and there might be 70 officers on in the day. At night time, there's 5 officers for 500 prisoners. And all of his cameras everywhere, you can sneak off, you can go where you want within the prison. You've got sort of free run. So things could happen. Somebody could disappear. Blind spots.
Yeah.
Or it could be like a distraction. We could say, oh, you just go and check this, you go and do that. And then they go and do something else.
What about relationships prisoner to prisoner? Were they common?
They're very, very common, yeah. And like I say, they were very scary at times. Because like I say, in Styal, in women's prisons uniquely, young offenders and adults are mixed together. So you'd see older women prisoners with, say, a 19-year-old prisoner. So someone in the 40s, someone in 19 years old. And I could see, even someone in the early 20s, just little signs like, the arm over the shoulder, around the neck, talking like that, whispering. They're trying to do like a loving gesture, but you could see, well, that's saying, I own you, you do what I say. and you'd speak to perhaps a young prisoner, saying, "Oh, is everything all right? You know, are you having any trouble with anyone?" And they'd be very sheepish, very almost as if they'd been told, "Don't say anything to anyone." And it happened a lot. But there were also prisoners in relationships who were perhaps married outside. So you'd have a female prisoner married to a man. We call it gay for the stay, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, that went on. When we shared a cell, things happened. When you go around, count the prisoners at certain times of the day, you'd open that flap and you'd see some sights.
Well, in those houses, people would be in bed with each other all the time.
Yeah.
And obviously, but there was one particular house where the time I was there, they trialed it for about a year and then had to close the idea down because they put older women who were in for a long time, and they put the young offenders, they put the young girls in that house with this imagination that it would be a really healthy thing because, you know, the older women would nurture, they were going to put all these interventions, which they did trial, which was like sewing and baking or whatever, you know, art and craft, maybe not needles, but, you know, art and craft and baking and then they had to separate them because they were basically all sleeping with each other.
Turning them out.
And I'm not being fully one-sided. I mean, there were some prisoners who genuinely were very protective of the younger prisoners. And you could see that it was genuine. You know, they actually want to help them and say, "What are you doing in here? You were in here last year. What are you doing? You're 20. I've been doing this for 20 years, coming in and out. You don't want it in your life."
That's true.
But, like I say, for some people, it's giving them keys to the candy shop, some of the older prisoners. And as I say, you know, young offenders mixed with adults. We call them vulnerable prisoners. And normal prisoners, you might say, could sometimes be mixed together because it's that prisoner's choice. You say, right, you're in for this offence. You don't really want the other women to know that you're in for this. Well, they could say, "Oh, I'm not bothered. I'll go with them." But then, like you say, you could have young offenders unknowingly with predators.
Yeah.
So when convicted baby killer Lucy Letby was due to arrive, was the prison put on notice because it was so high profile?
Well, I didn't know she was coming, to be honest. Early on, obviously, it's quite a big case now, but back then it was just little sort of things you saw on the news. I was nurse arrested at this hospital, you know, some babies passed away. It was all very vague. And then when it came out that this person's been charged with, you know, the murder of so many babies, I think it was sort of Chester area. So I thought, oh, well, that's our catchment area, Styal. She might be coming here. And that particular night I was off, but you got text messages basically offering overtime, which could be sit with a prisoner in a hospital or we call it constant watch on a prisoner's side watch, where you basically just sit and watch the prisoner because you've got the MAT documents, but then you've got a constant watch, which are basically saying, if we don't watch this prisoner all the time, something really bad could happen. So I signed up for this constant watch that came out. I thought, oh, we'll go and just do that. I'll earn some money, bit of overtime. And I turn up at the prison. I've done it loads of times before, these overtimes. And the manager said to me, "Oh, you know who it is, don't you? This constant watch, it's Lucy Letby." And it was her first night. Obviously, she's got whole life tariff now, but it was her first night on remand. She'd come from court that day, been charged. And she was kept on the segregation unit because obviously, you know, she's category A prisoner. As much as Styal is mixed in and integrated, you know, even they're not that stupid. So I turn up, sit down on the segregation, and first thing sort of hit me, you see all these photographs, you know, it's this like normal looking sort of blonde woman. And I was surprised how sort of dishevelled she looked. She didn't have blonde hair, brown hair. She just looked sort of drained. Like I say, it was night time, so she slept I think she might have asked me what time it was at one point. Might have been just a few words exchanged, not much. But obviously people are sort of saying now these little things in the news saying, "Oh, well, she's been stitched up, is she guilty?" And I've not read into the case, and on the jury, I've not heard all the details. But I always think back to that first night when she was there and I was sat watching her, thinking if I'd have been accused of this, I'd be climbing the walls. I'd be saying, let me out, I've not done this. But it was almost as if it was just a bit of a burden to her. She was just a bit like, oh, I'm here. What time is it? What's happening? So, yeah, I can't comment on it, in terms of, is it true, is it not, what happened, but she's a very, very strange character, is my opinion of her.
How long was she in that cell for?
I think it was only 2 days, something like that, because there is one women's prison in Britain, I think it's Peterborough area, where they hold Category A women's prisoners. And she only came to us because she'd been to court in the area. So she came to us initially that first few days, and then she was shipped out down there. I'm not aware of the other prisoners knowing that she was there, to be honest. At the time, they probably have learnt since. But
so how do they treat child killers at Styal?
The other prisoners?
Yeah.
Yeah, not well. Like I say, everyone sort of knows who they are, the child killers, because we've seen the faces on the news, in the paper, wherever it may be. And the prisoner's clever enough to not do stuff in front of officers, say. They might shout something, say, oh, keep her away from me, baby killer, and all this. But obviously it was when we weren't there, perhaps during the night. But sometimes we sort of played the game. I remember, like I say, sometimes these vulnerable prisoners choose to live with the normal prisoners. And then I think this particular prisoner had lived on this house block for maybe a month, 2 months. And she got along with the other prisoners. She was just another one. And then on the news, because we have obviously living room in the house TV, the faces on the news, she killed a baby. So the other prisoners, I remember what they did. I was quite amazed what they did, to be honest. They basically, all the prisoners, say 20 prisoners in the house who were watching TV, left the living room, left this woman in the room, called for the staff to come. And they're all there, stood at the doorway to the house, and she's in the living room on her own. And they said to us, right, are you moving her? We know what she's done. And that was it. So that's, translates as move her or something may happen to her. And I was quite amazed they hadn't acted on impulse, to be honest. And, we sort of understood the right thing to do in a way. But,
Yeah. Considering most of those women are separated from their own children.
Oh, yeah. But she was lucky in a sense that the person sat next to her could have had her baby killed or something like that. And it could have happened completely differently. It could have ended disastrously. So I was quite amazed by how that happened. But no, they're not treated very well by the other prisoners, vulnerable prisoners, as we call them, people who've done stuff to children.
So she was shipped out really after a few days, was she, down to the other prison?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
Peterborough, was it?
Yeah. The vulnerable prisoners, as you call them, have a sort of a hierarchy within themselves, which is a strange thing you learn. So you've got people in for, say, rape on an adult. It's bad, but it's not as bad as raping a child. And that's not as bad as killing a baby. And all the other normal prisoners see them as a group. We don't want anything to do with them. Within themselves, we've got this kind of levels. So it's very strange. And it's not something you'd know if you didn't go into a prison.
Yeah.
So what about the staff? What's their attitude towards those prisoners?
Well, as well as me personally, obviously, you've got to toe the party line to a point. So if you see a prisoner sort of victimising one of these vulnerable prisoners, you have got to challenge it, obviously. But then in your head, you're thinking, you sort of the officer in the uniform, and then when you go home, you've got a different opinion of these people. But your job is to, keep them there, keep them safe, keep them secure, no matter what they've done. Like I say, I didn't look up what each person had done, but if I knew, sometimes you couldn't help knowing they might be on the news. Sometimes you had to look. But I must admit, it might be perfect. I'd have less patience when I knew somebody had done a crime like that. Like, I'd spend more time talking to a normal prisoner and perhaps give them a bit more time of day or try and do a bit more for them. But perhaps I could be a bit, I'd do the bare minimum with the vulnerable prisoners. I'd tick the boxes. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd do my job.
Yeah,
I wouldn't build a relationship. Yeah.
I agree. I had one of the hardest cases that I had to deal with was a a young grandmother, probably in her 50s or whatever, who'd sexually abused a baby. And she was kind of one of my research participants. And obviously, like, she told me her story in depth, which, was quite difficult to listen to. But yeah, that's what she was in for anyway.
Did she try and justify it? Did she give a reason why she did it?
She did. She did justify it. She was part. I suppose that, you have to try and stay professional and impartial, but her argument was that she was groomed and part of kind of a PR ring to do these things and share these videos and photographs, because she herself was like a victim of, a male PR ring. But it was a really tough case.
Yeah,
it was a really tough one to deal with, because the child was her grandchild.
There was no way you could ever condone somebody doing a crime like that, but then when you hear they've done that to their child, but they had that done to them as a child, so it obviously doesn't condone it, but you sort of understand why it's happened.
Yeah.
And there must be a way of fixing it along the way, which I'm not, it just hasn't happened. But unfortunately, it can be generations. They've been abused, they abuse their own kids, it goes on. Because I remember speaking to older staff who perhaps worked at Styal 30, 40 years, who said, I remember when her grandmother was in, they've seen entire families, generations coming in and out of prison for the same offences. They've all been domestically abused, they've all been abused as kids.
And the revolving door is rife, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we were speaking about that before the podcast. People are just in and out like a yo-yo.
It's their home to a lot of people.
Is home. Yeah. I interviewed women who said, as soon as they release me, I will be committing a crime to get back in, because I have nowhere else to go. And here I have food, I have friends, I have a roof over my head, and I can't live on the streets.
Yeah.
So, especially if they release me in the winter, I'll do what I need to do to come back.
Well, like I say, with people who've been in and out for 20 years, we've got very close friends who've also been in and out for 20 years. And their lives have sort of ran in parallel. They've been released and come back. They both might be addicts, for example. But they've got to know each other, and that's their life. Because like I say, their parents might have done it. It's not like the parents were perhaps middle-class people, had a job. It can happen, but that's all they know. They don't know anything else. They know that's what you do when you become an adult. You go to prison, and you come out and you go back, and that's it's depressing, really. But that is some people's lives. And then, like I say, they might have children in prison, mother and baby unit, they're born in the prison, and then as adults they come back as adult prisoners. Those babies who were born in that baby unit, they come back as prisoners, and you just think there's something not working there. The cogs of the system just aren't. There's something wrong. Yeah.
Well, more support should be put in place for people not to go there in the first place.
So, are there any Styal stories we've missed out before you moved to Risley? Is it?
In terms of Styal stories, no. Obviously, COVID happened when I was at Styal, which obviously it rocked the world, but it rocked the prison system quite badly as well. Because obviously, at first initial COVID lockdown, it was like panic. Nobody knew how to behave, what we could do, what we couldn't do. And then, although obviously prisons are governed by the National Home Office, each prison has a certain amount of autonomy. So obviously governors, management were panicking, saying, this prison's not doing that, but we're doing it. Should we do that? Should we unlock anyone? Should we keep them all locked up? And it became very, I think prisons in this country are draconian anyway, but, it got to a point, the initial COVID lockdown, prisoners were in the cell 24 hours a day. They might, every couple of days, have half an hour to walk around the yard. They might have a shower once a week. And then you think, hang on, we're dealing with COVID, it's a health issue, but we're making hygiene worse in the prison. And it was just basically panic. Nobody knew what was going on with COVID.
And no one was getting any visits.
Nobody's getting any visits, no.
Lockdown after lockdown.
Yeah, so no one's getting any visits, so that means mental health's getting worse. They're not getting time out the cell to perhaps do fun things, have a game of pool, even go to, say, stimulate them, go to education, go to work. So obviously, they're sat there in the cell on their own thinking about their life. So obviously, self-harm happens, it heightens. So it caused chaos. It could have been, COVID was like unexpected. Nobody knew what to do, but it could have been dealt with better in prisons, definitely.
So you moved during COVID?
Well, I think sort of just before the COVID lockdown, it came up, we call it detached duty, where basically an understaffed prison speaks to an overstaffed prison and say, can we have some of your staff? And so I thought, well, I might try that. And it was a prison called Onley, which is in Rugby, Warwickshire. And the prison service pays for you to go, pays for your hotel, your food, everything. You go and you work in that prison. And it was a male prison. I never worked in a male prison. And I thought, well, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. This I was quite nervous about it, because I've only worked with women. And when I went there, the one thing I liked is, obviously, Styal, it's not a traditional prison, but that was very much so. So I thought, right, well, I quite like, the security is a bit more heightened, the staff are a bit more switched on. The prisoners can still do everything, go to work, have recreation time, but it's all a bit more ordered. So I thought, oh, well, I wouldn't say I was getting disillusioned at Styal, but it was a strange time. Obviously, that assault had happened, and I felt a bit sort of down the pecking order. I wasn't going to get promotion if I wanted, because management were thinking of, I dealt with certain incidents wrong. I was obviously exposed to male prisoners for the first time. And obviously, superficial things, physically more intimidating. Because like I say, I'm 6'4", but there's always somebody bigger than you, especially in prison when you've got nothing to do but train all day, go to the gym. You see some, enormous people who have, been fighting all their life. They're capable, they might be ex-military men and all this, people who've, bare knuckle boxers, all of these sorts of people, gangsters. And only uniquely, this prison was an overflow prison for all the London jails. So, like, big gang problem, obviously, London jails. We tried to split them up by sending them to Onley. So, obviously, again, I'm exposed for the first time to, proper organised criminals, proper heavy people, if you like. But despite all of that, I actually, when I first went to Onley, I thought male prisoners are going to be harder, it's going to be more of a challenge. I actually found it not easier, but I felt a bit more suited to it, because as a man I can relate to men more, whereas women have a barrier up, especially women who've been abused by men. Men you can relate to a bit more, they open up to you. I know I feel a bit more comfortable around men in that, authoritative way. I'm the officer, you're the prisoner. You always have a thing up with female prisoners saying, I can't be too sort of manly and, shouty or anything like that. But you sort of, what I always thought is, if a male prisoner doesn't like you, but if a female prisoner doesn't like you, you don't know. They might be nice as pie to you.
I think that's the same with the outside world.
It is, yeah. Yeah, but you can sort of read men easier. And I thought, well, I can actually deal with this. So, although I was slightly maybe getting disillusioned at Styal, I thought, well, I'll try and get a transfer to a male prison because I like this. And so obviously, closest home for me was HMP Risley, which is, not an overly notorious place, but it's certainly got a history. They used to call it Grizzly Risley. I was, like I say, traditional, built as a prison, not like an orphanage like Styal. I think it was built in the 60s. Obviously, the riots in Manchester, in strange ways, in the 90s were big national news. But I think, I don't know if it was a couple of years before or after, there'd been riots at Risley, which were quite bad, and destroyed a lot of the old jail. So it had quite a history to it. It's quite a place, and it was a much bigger prison, because Styal's very small, holds 500 prisoners. Risley could hold, I think it was 1,400, like maximum, so much bigger place. But like I say, I'd been at that other male prison, so I applied for it, managed to get a transfer, and I started at Risley.
And was that intimidating?
At first it was, because I was thinking, I enjoyed that 2 weeks, but that 2 weeks I was very much just a spare part, because they knew I was only there for 2 weeks only. But now I'm one of the team, and the prisoners are going to, I'm going to see them every day, they're going to see me every day. And although you're doing the same job, you're still a prison officer, you're almost starting your career again, because I was at Styal for maybe 2.5 years, and in that time, I knew the faces of the prisoners. They knew me. You had a certain rapport, but now you're back to square one. So although you've got 2.5 years experience in the job, to them you're just day one to the prisoners. And it was hard at first, prisoners had barriers up, they had fences up. And again, they tested you out, like I said before, about never making a false promise to a prisoner. They'd ask you to do something very basic for them. And then if you did it, or you were honest about not being able to do it, then they'd tell fellow prisoners, oh, you got a problem, he's all right. But then if you forgot to do something for them, they say, oh, don't bother with him, he's useless. So you had to sort of set your stall out. And like I say, you're on stage, it's sort of like an audition in a way. Because if, as an officer, if all the prisoners on the wing you work on hate you, you're not going to lose your job, but your life might not be worth living. You're not going to enjoy going to work. You're not going to cope mentally yourself. So it is sink or swim in a way.
So what category were they in then? Was it a lot of Scousers and Manx?
Oh, it was a lot of Scouts and Manx, yeah. They were category C at Risley. So obviously category A is the highest. So they're like long-term prisoners, terrorists, worst of the worst. Category B is prisoners who don't need like huge security, but they need keeping an extra eye on. And then category C is they're unlikely to try and escape, but they can't be trusted in open conditions. But you got a mixed bag. You got people who had been category A prisoners who'd done 10, 15 years, who'd been downgraded. And then you had people who'd just come in with doing the first sentence 6 months. So like I say, obviously unlike Styal, there wasn't a mixture of, everybody's kept separate. It was all adults at Risley, no young offenders. There were certain wings, there was one, the jail was basically split down the middle between the vulnerable prisoners and the normal prisoners. So we never mixed. And even when they did move around the jail, we had different visit sessions, we had everything separate. So I liked the idea of that a bit more. It was a bit more organised. But then, like I say, you had a bit of everything. You had people who were in for maybe a driving offence for 6 months. I mean, you could have people in who'd done 30 years for murder.
Yeah.
Does that include the body on the coal heap necrophiliac?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a hell of a way to start a conversation, isn't it? But there was this particular prisoner, was a vulnerable prisoner, obviously, in the title, but he was the longest serving prisoner I ever came across, because I was, like I say, I was based on one particular wing at Risley, which was the induction wing, reception wing. But on this particular day, I was put on this unit, and this, he's probably 5 foot tall, 70 years old man, with glasses on, just unassuming, on a walking stick. Just came up to me chatting normally, oh, how's your day, all this, the weather's nice, and saying all this stuff. But there was something a bit strange about him. He seemed a bit, over-friendly, to a new officer. And then, obviously, the conversation finished, I went off, talking to my colleagues. And we say, oh, I see he's pulled you, talking to you. And we say, oh, he's been at Risley for 20 years, but he's been in prison for 38 years or something. I was like, oh, what for? And they told me, I think he's actually out now, this man. He actually got released fully. He basically, I don't know if propositioned a woman and she rejected him. So the story was, I think I've read it somewhere on the internet somewhere as well. He killed her and then did things to her when she was dead. Dumped her on some coal heap somewhere. Went home, went to bed, back to his family. Woke up the next day, went back to where she was, had his way with her again. And then, obviously, he was caught down the line. But yeah, that was the most sort of harrowing thing. Offence. I've met somebody who's committed such an offence and is the longest serving prisoner I'd ever met. But like I say, at this point, he must have been in his mid-70s, been in prison since he was, say, 30. Wow. And they released him just because, he's going to have to go in a care home on the outside. He's done his sentence. He's not a danger anymore because he's just this frail old man. But it's certainly an eye-opener, yeah.
So the Liverpool and Manchester, are they rivals in the prison system, or were they getting along?
Well, you had they were obviously naturally rivals. Sometimes it could be sort of informal in a bit of a jokey way. Sometimes it was serious. But within them groups, you'd have obviously rival gangs. So different areas of, say, Liverpool didn't like each other. Like, say, Manchester. I'm not going to single out Salford, but there was like the Salford gang and then, say, wherever else. So you had sort of divisions within. Manx and Scouse as sort of rivals, but you had rivals within. So you'd have young lad. I remember a young lad coming on the wing who was from Salford, and he was quite, let's say, low level, say, drug dealer, say. And it was his first day in. Don't think he'd been in prison before. And he was queuing up to get his meal. But on the staff, the prisoners who work serving food on the servery, was this very high up sort of drug dealer, this very high up, you know, number one, number two in a gang from Salford. And he was sort of questioning this older lad, saying, "Oh, whereabouts you from?" and all this, because he'd recognised him, but he didn't let on because we stood there. And he could hear all the prisoners chatting and all this, and this lad went sheepish. So yeah, I think if you can go 2 miles, there'll be a gang, you know, every 2 miles in some of these areas, you know, because the big urban sort of jungles, you know, sort of council estates in Manchester, Liverpool. And there's so many different groups within prison, so many different gangs I never heard of.
So that erupt into violence then?
Oh, it could, yeah, but it'd never be in front of us. You know, a prisoner would come to the staff office with a black eye or bleeding and say, "Oh, I fell in the shower." But you knew what happened because you'd see them arguing with somebody else, or, you know, having it to do with someone, or saying something, or being disrespectful to somebody else. So we made sure staff aren't around, or somebody's been stood at the cell door watching, see if we come as a lookout, and they filled him in, basically.
Would you say there's more contraband in the male prison?
I'd say so, yeah, because I think some of the men, in terms of, you know, the gangs, high up, say, gangsters, were a bit more connected in a way than some of the women. I don't know if that's a male-female thing, I'm not sure. There were female, you know, drug sort of barons at Styal, but we had a lot more sort of people, like we had a whole network of people who could bring stuff in for them. You know, say, if one prisoner's got a phone and they're quite high up in like a gang, they can then, you know, there's 20 people in contact to set up a perfect way of throwing something over, you know, a package over the prison wall, or fly a drone into the prison.
Did you get dead pigeons?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so context that, people had, on the outside, would kill a pigeon, find a dead pigeon, cut them open, put whatever it is inside, could be drugs, phone, anything in a parcel, throw the pigeon over the wall. So obviously, the staff we throw, there's a dead pigeon, but they've arranged for that pigeon to come over, you know, on the exercise yard and get all the contraband. Even like pieces of fruit, like we'd hollow out an orange or something like that, and we'd throw it over. Like I say, ingenious ways of doing things.
And how strong was the Muslim prison gang when you were serving?
To be honest, there were a lot of Muslim prisoners, and you could see they did very much, you know, they were polite to us as staff and sort of integrated with the non-Muslim prisoners, but you could see that they were very close and very, you know, you wouldn't mess with them sort of thing. Again, they were very connected, you know, they knew people in other prisons. They knew if somebody, perhaps an extended family, were coming into another wing of a prison, they just sort of knew. Yeah, I think it's more so down the London jails and in the high security jails. There's a big Muslim Brotherhood, we call it, don't we?
Yeah.
It's a big problem, and a lot of riots have kicked off. So I think at Risley we had the people who've come down from those high security jails, but they still had the contacts, were still quite influential. And you could always tell who was in charge, you know, on a wing or within a certain group. And obviously we're open as society, but, you know, races did stick together in prison. You know, one thing surprised me was like Afro-Caribbean prisoners didn't get on with like African prisoners, there was a rivalry, and I thought, well, I never really thought of that, but there's so many different groups, Eastern European gangs were quite a big one at Risley, because at Risley we have one wing which is part staffed by Home Office staff, immigration enforcement. So prisoners were kept there, foreign national prisoners, until they got sent, we got deported. They were particularly in Risley, they were the main gangs, the Eastern European gangs, the Albanians.
The Albanians.
Yeah, they're very organised. Also very big lads as well, they're always training in the gym. Very violent as well.
Before you got the hot thrown on you, the hot tea, did you ever feel threatened ever before that in that prison?
Oh, yeah, well, I wouldn't say personally threatened, but there were more situations where I thought, this prisoner might attack me. Because like I say, with women, I didn't know that prisoner was going to assault me. But with men, you can see the temper rising. You can see the threatening, the saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that.
Have you got any stories of that you could describe?
There was one prisoner one day who, I think he was quite unpredictable, quite a vocal prisoner. But he sort of played the game with us, did what he had to do, to appease the staff. But, he wore his heart on his sleeve. He could very much wind people up, get on staff's wrong side, get on other prisoners' wrong side. But he was quite high up in a gang somewhere. And I remember one day, I don't know what started the argument, and I think he was high on drugs as well. He was refusing to go back to his cell, and, his eyes are wide. He was quite a wiry lad, with 12 stone, maybe 6 foot, very skinny lad, but you could just see that, if he kicks off, we're going to struggle, because he's that tense, he's that switched on, he's high on something. He was very vocal, very animated. And I've never seen somebody like that before, to be honest. But like we say, it's drug. You can have drug-induced psychosis, you can have all sorts of things, People on drugs don't feel pain, so even if you did go to restrain them, you couldn't do anything, superhuman strength. So like I say, compared to Styal, I'd say in Risley, you knew when people were getting angry, but in Styal, you didn't have time to be intimidated by it because it just sort of happened. But in Risley, you could sort of tell, hang on, something's going to happen here. So then you're thinking about things, what do we need to do? Do we need to move away? Do we need to do something? So that makes you a bit more anxious in a male prison.
I used
because you're
to
anticipating.
go to Risley for a little while, and Spice was a huge issue. Spice was a big issue. And I did a research project for a short amount of time, went on and interviewed a particular group of men, but the Spice was scary.
Well, I was obviously went to Risley after Spice had been there for a few years, but, I heard a lot of people say, when it first hit, it was just ridiculous. Before it was there to compare to how it is now. Just uniquely what Spice does to people. I mean, there's been videos on YouTube and things, with people in prison under the influence of Spice. And what quite cruelly as well, people obviously get addicted to Spice, but then the way they react, they sort of become zombified, become slumped over. They'll do anything that they're told. They'll do ridiculous things. If you told them to jump off a 20-foot cliff, he might probably do it on Spice. But other prisoners then, for a laugh, would give these Spice addicts Spice just for a laugh, just to see how they'd react. So I'll take that, I'll watch him, look at him. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm sure there is a treatment for Spice, but, you see prisoners with smoke weed. Obviously weed has different effects, but it's mainly sort of a calming thing, like a downer, it chills people out. Other drugs are stimulants, but Spice, it's just, such a small amount of it can kill you, can wipe you out, so strong.
What was the craziest things you saw people do on Spice?
You just saw people, like, you'd think they were dead.
Yeah.
It didn't particularly make people violent, Spice, but you'd go in a cell and, they'd be slumped in the strangest position, thinking they've just had a, horrific heart attack and died. I mean, he'd perhaps tap them on the shoulder and they'd, be red-eyed, looking at you, looking around, dazed. because it just completely knocks them out. But spice is something, that's, I wouldn't say very easy, but they're very inventive at smuggling it in because they can spray it on paper. I don't know. I think because it can be in a liquid form, spice, so it can be sprayed on a piece of paper. And obviously, mail in prisons, letters sent in are checked, but the legal mail from a solicitor can't be checked, can't be read by staff. So the idea is the prisoner opens it in front of the staff, shakes the envelope, makes sure there's nothing in there, but obviously can't tell if that paper's been sprayed with spice. And we'd have certain numbering on legislation written on the envelope telling us that it's legal mail, we can't open it. But then obviously people have told people on the outside, prisoners have, saying, oh, well, if you send me spice and you put this on the envelope, the staff won't check it. So you never know if it came in or not. So spice is something I think they can't really stop in prison. I don't know how we're going to stop it.
Did you see people on spice?
I've definitely interviewed people since they've come out of prison who told me in graphic detail about how they use it for entertainment purposes, and obviously can almost abuse people as well because they're so out of it.
Oh yeah.
And conversations about officers even bringing it in, and
oh yeah,
it's good money, I guess, for officers, isn't it?
Well, I'll say more so in Risley compared to Styal, there's a bit more security at Risley. You were searched going into the jail as staff, airport style security, but there were more staff being caught with things, and you heard, oh, they've been sacked, they asked to resign because we've been bringing things in. And I'm not sure what it was, but I think it is. I'm not calling a certain age group of people because I was young. I was 23 when I joined. But we started actively recruiting university graduates up to a point into the prison service. And, very young people, 20, 21 years old, 19. And that's the first ever job. So it's a walk in the park for some 40, 50-year-old man to offer them a bit of money, manipulate them, be nice to them, and say, we can make some money. You've got a student loan to pay off. You've got to pay rent. Bring me this letter in. You can just put it in your shirt pocket. No one will find it, and you can make this amount of money. So prisoners have clocked onto that as well. But I think, and I'm certainly not calling, being sexist or anything like that, but young female staff could be, charmed by, these, very charismatic male prisoners, and they give them compliments and they say, oh, you look nice today, miss, and all this, and, that builds up rapport. And then it obviously extends into perhaps a relationship, or can you bring this in for me? Or if you don't bring this in for me, I'll tell the staff that me and you have been doing this in my cell at night, even if it hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So rather than then reporting that, they feel like, oh, I've got to do this. They feel, but the prisoners know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, 100. As a female going into a male prison, that was a really different experience.
Because obviously as a male going into a female, I thought, well, to try and manipulate me, might try and put the charm on me a bit, but I wasn't, I don't know, physically intimidated. I'm not saying women are weak or young females are not capable, because some of the best staff in Risley were young, dainty females, because they were best at talking, could de-escalate things. But, as a young, like I say, 18-year-old, because you can be 18 and join the prison service, it's your first ever job going into a prison. Like I say, you might have grown up like me, been quite shy, quiet, and you've just stumbled across this job. You're just sort of a fresh piece of meat who can be moulded, can, like a puppet. We can do anything they want and get you to bring anything in. And it's, they prey on the weak, some people.
It is young.
Yeah.
Did you see any staff get attacked at Risley?
Yeah. Assaults on staff. I'd say it was on a par with Styal, but it was a bit more violent at Risley. I didn't see anything too horrific, staff being attacked, but since I've left Risley, I have heard somebody got one of the supervisor officers got stabbed in the head from a prisoner. Obviously, what happened to me with the hot water, you heard that had happened to other, members of staff. Restraints had happened. Somebody be restrained, for example, and the prisoners are flaying him with kick out. There was one particular time, young female staff member got kicked hard in the face by this very large, drug-induced psychosis man who was having a, proper kicking off. And she went off work for 6 months. I don't think she ever fully came back after that incident. I don't know how much support she received or anything, but obviously men in the nature, with fighting, perhaps a bit more physically intimidating, they can cause damage to people, if they're not thinking about the consequences, we don't know their own strength, their own drugs. The assault staff, staff have been killed in the past. So they are more dangerous. I wouldn't say male prisons are more dangerous than female prisons, but I'd say, maybe they are slightly, because men can be a bit more, physically strong, violent. You hear people out on the street saying, we had a fight outside a club, I threw one punch and he died. It could happen in a prison quite easily,
Was it the hot water attack that started to make you think about leaving?
No, not to be honest. I think I enjoyed my initial, like I said, I was at Styal for 2.5 years, and I was at Risley for roughly the same time, just under 5 years in the service as a whole. And maybe in the last 12 months, things started to change in terms of, and I was never, I say I was sort of like a medium prison officer. I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't super screw, as it were. I was just sort of run-of-the-mill, came and did my job, went home. But I saw the standards of recruitment being lowered over time because staff were being assaulted and leaving, or they're retiring, or, like I say, they were actively recruiting university graduates on a scheme whereby you complete the scheme, you get, I think it was a master's degree. So obviously when they got that master's degree, they're going to leave after 2 years. And so obviously the government, I think we haven't got enough officers. So we've got to lower the bar for people to get in. And like I say, you don't get interviewed anyway. You can be 18 years old. You don't need any qualifications other than basic reading, writing. You can't really go much lower. But we started to recruit some staff who shouldn't have been there. And as much as, we come onto the wing and you try and help them, and you get frustrated because you think this member of staff, they weren't necessarily like quiet or untalkative or anything, but they were just putting themselves in danger the way they spoke to people. They were coming in, ordering people about, prisoners on day one, which you don't do. You've got to build things up over time. And I just thought, the older staff who've been there, because there was a gap in the prison service in the country where they didn't recruit any staff for about 10 years. I think it was maybe 2000 to 2010. So you had people retiring who'd joined, say, in the 80s. And then you had people like me who'd done 4 years. So I was starting to realise, well, when all these staff retire, the older staff, I'm left with these people who shouldn't really be here, and I'll be the one in charge. So that's when I started thinking, perhaps I can't do this for 20, 30 years. And then I did hear some tales of, they call it positive discrimination. And obviously I'm open to anyone, multicultural. But I heard people go into the training school, doing things like the control and restraint training and failing it on the second attempt, failing it third time. So it's nothing against that person. They'd be amazing in another job in every aspect of their life, but we shouldn't do this job. They're not capable of it. But I heard that they were saying to the instructors, no, pass this person because of their ethnicity, because of, sexual orientation, because of this, that and the other. So then I'm thinking, well, it's just getting more dangerous. Like I've been assaulted. Other staff, been assaulted to the point where they've left the job. And I thought, well, I don't feel safe anymore. I don't feel safe.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's an epidemic right now. Headline news in the last couple of weeks is throat slashings, jugging.
Oh yeah, and it's like you say, very notorious prisoners. Like we say, we've been on about the Southport killer, who obviously national news. Everybody knows how bad that crime is and what that person has done, how dangerous that person is. But they're being allowed hot water. They're being allowed cooking utensils. And my insight is certain managers within the prison are amazing. They do an amazing job, but certain managers in the prison are trying to go up the ladder. So they take these people on as a project so they can put on the CV, I've helped the Southport killer do this, this and this because I gave him this opportunity and he did this. And so they're trying to be too nice with these prisoners, trying to give them everything to try and change their life and change that person. But some people, don't want to be changed and just can't be changed. Some people can, but someone like, that particular person, you're not going to rehabilitate.
Yeah.
But managers sort of take them on as a case, saying, I'm going to develop this person. I'm going to give them the world. And then things like this happen.
So when you're constantly feeling unsafe all the time and you can't even keep the people who are in there safe, like how do you wind down from that? How do you cope with that yourself?
Well, that goes on to something else that happened over time. For me, it was drinking. At Risley in particular, there was a drinking culture amongst the staff. And I wasn't one of these people, but I've mentioned before, there are some staff who are very sort of macho. They think they're macho men, they're not. But, they come in the morning and say, who we're restraining today, who we're scrapping with today. And there's this sort of lads culture, every lunchtime, going to the pub, having 3 or 4 pints, then going into work in the afternoon. And like I've heard people say in the past on, YouTube and films and stuff like that job's hard enough, but imagine doing it drunk. But it was happening, and I became part of that not because I'm one of these, trying to be like a man's man or something, because I just thought, I'm here for 12, 13 hours a day. I don't feel safe. I've got to have something to keep me happy, something to look forward to. I'd wake up and think, should I ring in sick today, or I don't want to go in today. But I think, if I go in today, at least I get to go to the pub at dinner time, which sounds awful. But that's the point it got to, where I thought, I was doing the job, I wasn't being lazy, I was ticking the boxes, trying to reply myself, but it got to the point where I couldn't do the job as well as I used to if I hadn't had a drink at lunchtime.
Because an escapism.
Yeah, it's just that hour to reset where you could just talk with your colleagues, watch TV, eat lunch, but no, we went to the pub. And then one of my jobs in the prison was to interview the new prisoners coming in the reception, to identify, like, have they risked themselves, with part of a gang, have they been in prison before, have been in contact with a family, just work out any concerns for that prisoner. And I thought I was reasonably quite good at it, I could do it, quite in depth. Some other people I could see them half-heartedly doing it, just asking the questions off a sheet, list of questions to go after each prisoner, but I'd expand them questions into a conversation. But, it got to a point whereby you go to the pub every dinner time, and then that sort of gave me energy, having a pint at lunchtime, so I'd perhaps be a bit more talkative, because I'd had a few drinks in these interviews. But then, as much as I felt that was a good thing, you're doing that after having a drink. You're doing one of the most important jobs in the prison that could be life or death. That could determine if that prisoner is going to harm someone else in prison or be a danger to staff. And it got out of hand. And I'd have bad days in prison as well, whereby I'd go home and drink. So we'd been in the pub at lunchtime, been pub after work, and then you go home and you drink. And then, the day I decided I need to start looking for other jobs here was I woke up in the morning and the whiskey was still on the mattress next to me. And I thought, oh, this isn't, what was I then when I left? 27, say. This isn't how a 27-year-old should be living their life. Sort of functioning on alcohol, it's a problem. And obviously I'm working with people who are where they are in life because of drugs, because of alcohol. And I thought, no, I've got to stop while I'm ahead, while I've still got sort of some control. So that's when I decided I'm going to look for other jobs. I've not been in the job very long, but just best part of 5 years. But I can see the direction prison service is going in, and I don't want to be part of it. And since I have left,
What year did you leave?
25. End of September 23, I left.
Wow, really recent.
Yeah, so still less than 2 years. But like I say, it's... sorry, mate, I forgot what I was saying.
How easy was it for you to like break that cycle and just stop? Like, did you just go, that's it?
Well, it was getting out of there, to be honest, because I don't, to a point, peer pressure, feeling part of a team, because you do, obviously. You're with your colleagues 12, 13 hours a day. You sit with them more than your family. You want to be part of the team. And if everybody's going to the pub and you're the one who isn't, then you just think, well, I want to be part of the team. So I thought, well, I just don't need that option, as a way to cope. I can do a job where I don't need to do that. But then obviously, although I'd only done just less than 5 years in the service, I had become institutionalised, working shifts, wearing a uniform, doing certain routine things every day. So, and as, a younger person, that was it wasn't my first job. I'd done lots of other little jobs, part-time stuff, but it was my first actual full-time salaried job where that's your life, you go there every day. And I thought, well, I'm going to struggle to adjust to something else. What else could I do after doing this?
Was it a relief to leave?
It was, yeah, to be honest. I left before my notice period ran out because I knew I'd got another job and I was going. And one day it just sort of hit me, said, right, I went and spoke to the orderly officer, the officer in charge that day. And I said to him, I know my notice period isn't finished yet, but it's not safe for me to be here anymore, because as much as I'd always help the prisoners, I said to him, like, they're saying they haven't had the medication. And I just thought, I really don't care if they have or they haven't. And that's hard for me to say because it makes me sound an awful person. But I don't care if he's not got his order of vapes. I don't care if he's missed this appointment today. So you need people here who do care. So that's went out that day, September 23, that was it.
But it sounds like a healthy decision that you made for yourself.
I realised before it got worse, basically, that, if I'd have stayed 6 months longer, I'd probably be drinking more. I was diagnosed with anxiety depression. I don't know if it was around the same time, but that had got worse as well.
You were burnt out, weren't you?
Yeah, I was done, like I say. But I think it goes back to the start, people in the 20s normally are having fun, going out, drinking with their mates, living kind of a carefree life. But from the age of 19, I've done 4 years sort of policing, seeing them strange, horrific things, being in these strange situations, to going into prison, seeing like the worst of the worst, dealing with, some prisoners were, you could actually get along with. I'm not saying worst of worst, but some of them were. And I thought, like, well, I've not really lived a normal young person's life because I've been in these uniforms and, dealing with criminals and all of this.
Do you think the age is too low for both the police and the prison force?
Oh, definitely,
Do you think people should be like maybe 25 and have life experience?
I think so, yeah, because I can speak from experience. I joined prison service at 23, 24, and the police at 19. I don't think you should join either till you're 25, because you need to go out and perhaps have another job, learn how to deal with people, interact with people, perhaps have some, you don't want bad things to happen, but just have been through a bit of struggle in your life, know how to deal with a bit of adversity.
Before you're ready to
solve problems in your own life, before you're telling people how to solve problems in theirs.
Yeah.
Because although I'd You know, I wasn't stupid I was naive at the start, wasn't at the end. But, you know, I've never been married. I've got no kids. I'm telling men old enough to be my dad, you know, how to act around the kids, how to act around the wife. And you need to have a bit of life experience before you do that job. You certainly can't do it at 18 if it was 21, 25, but and we need to be stricter about who gets in as well.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, there was no interview when I started. We need an interview. We need to sit down and say, right, who are you? Not just one of these interviews where we say, give an example of this. You know, when have you worked as a team and been a leader or something? You say, no, who are you? Why do you want to do this? You know, why would prisoners want to speak to you over someone else?
Because the government answer is just build more prisons, but maybe the government needs to listen to this and think about who they're letting in,
Definitely,
at what age.
Because I hear now I'm not sure what the recruitment process is now, but like I say, I went to that assessment day and you did face-to-face role plays with actors. I've heard it's all just, I don't know, it's left over from COVID. It's all online now. It's just all like Zoom or, like say, watching videos saying, how would you deal with this? And I saw, like I say, the load of recruitment standards. Officers who somehow got through the training were just as shy as I was when I was back in school, didn't want to talk to people. The phone would ring in the office and I don't know what to say, I don't want to answer it. So, well, you're in a prison. You've got to deal with prisoners. Your job's talking to people. So something needs to change, definitely. But I don't think it will because, well, this all comes down to money. It all comes down to, you know, like you say, build more prisons, we'll just fill them up.
Big business.
Big contracts.
Yeah.
So when the stress of prison was gone from your life, were you able to just completely stop the alcohol?
It took a while, but it wasn't every day because obviously in the prison, every time I was on a day shift, it was lunchtime, evening, and that would go on for a whole week. So I'd still probably drank maybe every other day.
Like you were weaning yourself
Like weaning myself off it without sort of knowing I was, because it was so normal to me. And you build up a tolerance for drink over time and you can drink more. But I wasn't drinking for the same reasons. I was drinking just because I fancy a drink. I enjoy having a drink. I wasn't drinking to block something out like I was in the prison. I wasn't drinking to make my work life easier. I was drinking just to chill out after work because I could.
Did you get a more relaxed profession?
While I was, like I say, I did a lot of part-time jobs when I was a special. One of them was in a funeral home because one day as a special, there was a sudden death. Somebody passed away and police have to go check if there's anything suspicious. And then you call the undertaker's funeral staff to come. And then I saw these two men and just how they did the job, how dignified they were. And I thought, that's a job I never thought of doing. And so back then, I came across an advertisement. They wanted somebody casual, 0 hours, just to help out on funerals, you know, pick deceased people up from hospitals. So I thought, fancy that, it's a bit of money. So I did that while I was back when I was a special. And after the prison service, looking for jobs, I saw the same place I used to work was after somebody full-time. So I thought, a huge pay cut. But I thought, well, that's a job I actually really enjoyed working there. And like I say, I never planned to join the police, planned to join the prison service. I certainly never planned to do working with dead people.
Well, that's a really stressful job as well, because I just interviewed a crematorium worker and he's talking about he's watching them go in.
Yeah.
And the corpses are sitting up, hands burnt off.
Yeah.
Fluids squirting out of them. And he's saying the brains are the last to go.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, your story started with brains, and it's like, you've got that in my head now. I mean, it's traumatized you. You were there. It's traumatized me just hearing it.
But like I say, although, you know, I'm not religious or anything, but I think fate has sort of happened. You know, I didn't plan to join the police, but I saw them two men, the undertakers, come, ended up doing it, tried something else, worked in a prison. Now I'm doing it full time, that job. But I couldn't do my job now, I think, as well, without having worked in the prison, because you're dealing with people at the worst time of their life. That's what I'm doing now. But they're just not committed a crime, they're not in prison. I'm dealing with bereaved people. You know, when I meet families that are at the worst point in their life, who've lost the father of a son, child. But I know how to deal with somebody and not let it affect me. You know, I can stay professional, but also help them.
Everything that's come through this whole conversation is about you as a person, like caring about people and enjoying building relationships. And
Yeah, because, like I say, I was very shy when I was younger, and, you know, I wasn't outgoing. Probably missed out on a lot of friends growing up, but all of these jobs has brought me out myself. Like, I couldn't have sat here and done this. I couldn't have imagined him sitting here and doing this even at the start of my policing days, because I just wasn't a talker, a people person. But these jobs have built that in me. And as much as we ended on bad notes, you know, I didn't get in the police, I started drinking in the prison, but it's all sort of worked out where they prepared me for the job I'm doing now.
Are you happy now?
Yeah, I'm happy now, yeah, definitely. And I don't, well, sometimes I can't drink because you're on call for a week. You know, if somebody passes away in the night, outside business hours, we go and collect them, so you can't have a drink because you might have to go out driving. But I'm not thinking, oh, I really love a drink. It's gone.
Don't you think helping those people, though, you've internalised a lot of trauma? And have you had help with that trauma processing it?
Well, to be honest, I've spoken to friends and stuff, but I think the biggest help was just leaving.
But sometimes, you know, we've interviewed people who've been in these professions, and it's like they leave and there's the relief, but then things start to surface.
Yeah. Well, I still, every day, sort of reflect on some of the things that happened, and I say quietly home and think, well, I can't believe I used to do that as a job. I can't believe I've seen this, that, and the other. But then I do think, well, and rather than it affecting me, upsetting me, I don't know if it's positive mindset. I just think I'll have stories to tell when I'm older. You know, I'll always be able to say something interesting about what I've seen or somebody I've met.
That's a great way to look at it. You have a stoic mindset.
Yeah. Because like I say, I was diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and I was put on medication for that, but that's gone now. You know, I'm not on the medication. You know, I'm not backflipping around, smiling, cheerful all the time, but I'm happy with my job. I'm not drinking, you know. I've got, you know, I'm happy with my life. I wake up every day and I think, yeah, well, you know, get ready, go to work. Just do my job. I'm not thinking, oh, should I ring in sick? Oh, I might be in danger today. So it's worked out.
It's been a journey.
It has. It's been a journey, yeah. But it's been, you know, 8 years. It's not even a fraction of your life, really. But I just think, you know, that 8 years, all that's happened there, some people, I've never imagined it would happen in my whole life, you know.
It's a lot.
And it probably won't happen again, and I hope it is a bit more chilled out from now on in my life. Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Do you have any final questions, Lorna, before my final question?
No, just thank you so much for sharing that story. I really enjoyed like listening to everything. I relate to loads of things you said.
Like you say, if you had any therapy out, I find this sort of helps, just sharing it with people, saying the truth of what it's like, what I've been through.
I've been trying to get Lorna to step up and do podcasting for years. And for some reason today, the stars aligned. And you guys have worked in the same prisons?
Yeah.
What is the chances of that? This is like...
I say fate's
Styal
real.
and Risley were my
Fated?
two prisons that I did a lot of work
that
in.
was going to sync up like this.
I know. Who knew?
Oh, yeah.
You only contacted me yesterday and said, obviously good friends, and said, oh, I'm up north. Do you want to, meet up for lunch? And here I am. But I thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this.
It's a pleasure.
And listen to your journey. It's been amazing.
So my final question for you then is, for the viewers watching this then, perhaps there's some of them out there are thinking about becoming a prison officer. What's your advice?
I'd say I wouldn't put anyone off doing it. If a friend of mine or a relative said, I fancy doing that, obviously I'm biased, I'd say, I don't think that's for you. There's other better things out there. But obviously somebody's got to do it. And I'd say if you enjoy, building relationships with people, you enjoy, every day being different when you go to work. You're not just, say, in a call centre or working 9 till 5 in an office. You want to be out and active and meeting people. Do it. Go for it. And if it's not for you, then at least you've tried it. But if you do actually like dealing with people and helping people, like genuinely, not just to tick a box, not just to look good on your CV. If that's who you are, then do it, go for it.
Because do you regret doing it, even though you decided to leave?
No, I'm glad I've done it because it's made me who I am, and it's made me end up where I am. And I wouldn't be this person. I wouldn't have this personality. I wouldn't have, learned the things I've learned if I hadn't done it. So if I was to go back, I'd do it all again. But I would never go back. Yeah.
So for the viewers watching this then, who perhaps want to contact you or ask you a question or follow you on socials, are you available on socials?
I am, yeah.
So I'll include your links with this. Do you want to just let them know what socials you're on?
Well, yeah, you can find me on Instagram at DaveRobbo95. If you want to send me an email, it's that, DaveRobbo95, yahoo.co.uk. If you've got any questions about joining the prison service or, hearing a bit more about my story, feel free to get in touch.
So if you're watching this on YouTube, all of Dave's links will be in the description box below the video. And how did you click up with Samworth? Did you meet him after the profession?
Strange thing, after I've left the prison service, I've been interested in hearing other people's stories on such podcasts as yours and Samworth's. Just hearing their perspective and comparing it to mine. And thinking, oh, that's similar to mine, oh, that's different. And I just happened to email him one day and just say, I've quite fancy sharing my story. I see other people who've done the same as me. I'd quite like to talk about it. And it happened.
Yeah, shout out to Samworth. He was our first prison officer we interviewed. So viewers, if you want to check that one out, Wildman co-hosted with him as well. And it's hard-hitting, graphic stories.
He's got some stories to tell. Yeah.
He certainly has. And Lorna, if the viewers want to subscribe to your new YouTube channel podcast and follow you on socials.
I haven't set it up yet, but you can always follow Time Matters UK on socials, which is the support organisation I run for children of prisoners.
Thank you for watching this. Let us know in the comments what you thought. And if you need a VPN, NordVPN, link down there as well. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. That was brilliant. Nice one.